I think we're running pretty quick on time. All the answers should be available to you after you took that quiz. They should populate anyways. If you have any questions, you ask me about it later. But I think we should just get moving here. So as I mentioned here, guys, this is kind of a consolidation of a number of different classes here. It starts fairly basic, but moves into some pretty advanced stuff. In fact, stuff that's still being researched today and still hasn't been quite completed yet. So anyways, as you can imagine, I'm involved with a lot of research at the school, and yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing this with you. So we're going to talk about advanced nutrition today and some of the current research on the go. So first things first, guys, we're going to talk about a bunch of different things, but you know, before you start anywhere, you got to take a soil test. It's kind of like, if you think of it, a soil test as if you're sick and you go to the drugstore, you're not going to empty the shelves and take one of everything. That's exactly the same principle behind infertility. You got to take a blood test, or in this case, a soil test, to find out what you really need. Otherwise, you're just going to waste your money. So that's the first place to start. When we think about, you guys have seen this pH chart all the time, in probably more than once this year, last year, and the year before. You can really predict how your soils are going to behave based on pH. So where pH tests can be done by your supplier, we've talked about why those might be a little bit biased. But if you're Marcus is posting a little bit about his stress test this year. This pH chart, so here we go. If you take a soil test every year, and I would encourage you to do soil tests on your greens every year, they are your bread and butter. They can tell the tale in terms of what's really going on. Your pH, the more alkaline, and this is common here in Alberta, you can see, now it doesn't probably show up very clearly on here. This is center. This is considered neutral. 7.5 getting a little more alkaline. 8 is more alkaline. A lot of you guys out in Alberta here are in this range between 8 and 8.5. Now you can see how the availability of some of these micronutrients drop off a little bit. So typically when you have if you buy fertilizer from your local Alberta supplier, they're going to motivate you to buy these fertilizers that have these micronutrients built in already. Now, for some of you that are moving back into Ontario, where your pHs are quite a bit lower, you know, you're somewhere between the 6.5s, 6, and even as far as the 6s, different micronutrients become available or unavailable. It's easier to grow grass a little bit in Ontario, but you tend to have a little bit lesser availability of the calciums and the magnesiums and phosphorus, depending on what your pH is. So there is a bit of a telltale predictor in terms of what your soils are doing and how they're behaving just by your pH alone. And I know Dave's probably pounded this into your head lots of times. This is where we live here, right along here, about 8.5 here in Alberta on the rain shadow of the Rockies. So a lot of your products must have additions of these extra micronutrients, iron, manganese, boron, and copper, to make up for those losses. Even phosphorus, right in our range, sometimes can be a little bit limiting. So anyway, something to consider when you're looking at fertility programs and buying. Where your fertilizers go, again, starting simple. Nitrogen is top growth. Potassium is crown. This is facilitates health of the plant enzymatic reaction, the movement of nutrients above and below, and of course, phosphorus is for root growth. So when we're growing in, that's why we apply phosphorus. When we're trying to grow up, nitrogen and potassium for cell strength. That's why potassium is generally applied during stressful periods. Springtime, midsummer, even late fall, depending on your location, what's the most stressful for you. Most operators will apply a lot more potassium in the fall time as it gets ready for wintertime. Very basic, guys. NPK, nitrogen 24%, P is 5% here in this case, phosphorus, and potassium at 11%. Your micronutrients are all posted in there in the guaranteed analysis. Your particle or your your fertilizer bag also has a bunch of different things in it, including particle size, whether it's elite, mini, standard, and it'll also give you the release time. And we're going to talk about releases in just a few minutes. But this is important to know, whatever bag you're or product you're applying, how fast the release is. Some of it's immediately available. Some of it lasts up to 4 weeks. There's products with coatings out there that last up to 16 weeks now. So there's various different coatings out there that can really extend the life of your fertilizer, but you've got to pay attention to that. For instance, if you've got an 8-week release fertilizer, there's really no point putting it down at 1/10 of a pound. You'll never even see it. So you do have to pay attention. Some of the more expensive products, like the Scott's products, even Lesco products, they've done all the spreader calibrations for you, and they throw that right on the bag. This is what this reads down here. So you know right off the get-go, to speed things up, hey, I need to apply this 24% nitrogen product at a pound of nitrogen. My spreader settings are such and such for the various spreaders that I've got. Filler, if you've ever wondered, can anybody tell me why I might want to choose a 16-4-8 product over a 24-5-11 product, or rather the difference between a 16% nitrogen product and a 40% nitrogen product, if I was, say, applying to my greens?
Would the higher concentration be potentially more harsh on the plants when you apply it? It
could be. Like 4600 has a very high salt index, so it's very hot, as they say.
The amount of the amount of prills that need to be put out as well.
That's partly correct. Yep. Any other comments there? Why we would choose a high analysis versus a low analysis?
Would it be the size of the pearls themselves?
Not necessarily. That's another choice that you can make. Here's an example for you. If I'm asking you guys to go out and apply 1/10 of a pound of nitrogen or 2/10 of a pound of nitrogen on all your greens as an immediately available source, and we'll call it urea. The calculation now to figure out how much fertilizer you need is rate divided by the analysis. So if I want to put 0.2 pounds of nitrogen down, divided by the analysis, if I'm asking you to put down 4600 or urea, dividing 0.2, do this quickly. 0.2.
You wouldn't have barely any coverage if you used the higher analysis.
That's right. That rate, if I'm asking you to apply 0.2 pounds of nitrogen using a urea, you've got to try to get 0.43 pounds over 1,000 square feet. For those of you that most golf courses have 100,000 square feet of greens, 2.5 acres roughly. That's like asking that operator or you to go and apply 1 bag of fertilizer across 19 greens. It's damn near impossible. You look back at that superintendent and say, what? That's why we melt them down and put them in the sprayer. But that's the result of having to put, or that's why we'll use a lower analysis or filler to facilitate more even spreading and make it more realistic. It's much easier for you guys to choose like an 18-3-18 product or a 16-4-8 product, for example, in order to get a nice, consistent, and even spread over all your greens. As your analysis starts to creep up, it gets more and more difficult to stay even. Make sense? And if you guys have questions, you chuck it all out at me, okay? One other thing about fertilizer purchases, you got multiple different screen sizes. You've probably heard SGN sizing. There's standard, there's mini, and there's elite. For every screen size that you drop, every screen size that you want to get smaller, takes more processing. When you think about the cheapest agricultural grade fertilizers, a great big particle size, hit you in the side of the face and knock you over. If we were to put that down on a golf green, our mowers would just pick it up. It would take 100 years to break down, and we wouldn't get through the canopy, and we would just end up eliminating it. So the principle behind picking a product that has an appropriate particle size is for one sole purpose, and that's to get into the canopy and avoid getting picked up by your mowers or otherwise. So when and I'll ask you guys to do a full fertility program next year, but for that reason, I won't accept you buying a very expensive elite, tiniest little particle, to put on your fairways because it's a waste of money. The smaller particle size costs more. If that standard particle is smaller than an inch, which is your mowing height, there's really no fear of it getting into the canopy. Therefore, you can use a standard particle, which is the least expensive one. For minis, that's kind of somewhere in between. Maybe you're cutting your fairways tight maybe you're cutting them at 4/16 or 5/16, and you want them, and they're tighter than the average. You might want to use something in the middle, a little bit smaller than a standard particle, a little bit larger than an elite particle to make the most of your dollars. And that's how you choose a screen size. Okay. If that, I hope that clears up any questions in terms of particle size. Smaller particle size, simply more expensive. And I talked about this why. Some of these smaller particles, of course, they do melt really fast too, which is beneficial, especially on your greens. And we'll talk about homogeneous release in a sec. This is two different types. On the right-hand side, that's your standard particle, ag grade particle there. And I think I've got, no, I don't. You can clearly see the three different elements there, N, P, and K on the right. On the left-hand side, we have a homogeneous particle. Now, what that does, what the homogeneous process does, it takes everything here on the right, grinds it all down into a fine powder, and then sprays it in through a silo with polymer coating alongside of it. So what you end up getting is a single particle with all three elements within it. So you don't get this. This is what happens when you apply an ag grade particle to a golf green. Looks kind of like disease, eh? This was actually a real. This was a real example. I was over at a colleague's golf course. He asked me to come over and have a look at what was going on. He, of course, immediately thought it was disease, and we went over. And I had a little magnifying glass, and I got checking it out. I didn't see any fruiting bodies. I didn't see any mycelium or anything like that. So we're kind of a trial by elimination here. I said, I don't think this is disease. What else could be going on? And I said, just at a shot in the dark, you didn't by any chance put a really big prill or an ag grade fertilizer particle down on your greens, did you? And he goes, yeah, I did. I had a bunch of old stuff in the shop I wanted to get rid of. Well, this is exactly what happens when you put a very large 4600 ag grade particle down on your golf green. They call it fertilizer burn, but really what it is your fertilizer particle has a salt carrier. Salt is holds that urea together. So what happens is through a process of osmosis, if you put a high salt index particle beside a blade of grass or anything, a process called osmosis happens. And what it tries to, you've got a water concentration in the leaf blade or in the plant, and then you've got this high salt index in your fertilizer particle. So what happens is the fertilizer particle begins to diffuse into the leaf blade in order to try to equalize pressure, or in this case, the salt in the high concentration wants to get into the salt of low concentration to equalize itself. So that's what's happening in terms of fertilizer burn. It's the salt on index trying to equalize itself moisture-wise with the very low salt index of your leaf blade. So as soon as you have too much salt going into that plant, it dies. And then we call it fertilizer burn, but it's really salt burn. Incidentally, it's really hard to kill turf this way with any of the professional products that we use typically. You know, one of my mentors ages and ages ago taught me one of the best lessons that I'll never forget. You know, he told me to go out and put a pound of this product down, nitrogen down, and on all the greens. And just coming out of school, I was terrified. I'm like, what? A pound of nitrogen? You're going to burn the whole place down. I don't want to be a part of that. And he goes, come with me. We walked out to a fairway, and he said, we put a bag of this stuff in. And I think it was 18 or 21% nitrogen, something like that. Slow release source, but nonetheless, at the time, I didn't really know. Anyways, he says, open that sucker up as wide as it can go. So I opened up that spreader right to Z. And he goes, now push. And I emptied the entire bag in probably about 10 or 15 yards. And I thought, oh my God, we're going to come back here in 2 days and this thing is going to be smoked. Well, sure enough, within about a week, it started to go green. By the end of the second week, it was blue-green, like you could see it from space, but it was not, nothing was dead. And he said that's the benefit between using homogeneous particle and straight urea particle. It's very, very difficult to burn something because you're not getting the whole kick up against every single leaf blade like a great big fertilizer particle goes from 4600. So I thought that was a great lesson that I wanted to share with you guys. If you're doing some training and you want to train some of your interns on how to put this stuff down, give it a shot. Maybe not do it beside a golf green, but maybe you want to go to your driving range and just give it a shot. You know, and remember, guys, if you've got questions, chuck them out there. I'll be monitoring the chat box best I can. I get a little bit wound up when I talk about this kind of stuff. It really turns my crank. So I apologize if I'm going too fast. Tell me if I'm doing so and tell me to slow down. The goal behind fertilizer applications in general is this controlled release. You see in this image on the left-hand side, you've got urea in the yellow. That's straight urea, 4600. In a perfect world, you're getting all of that thing kick out in about 2 to 3 weeks. That's why your foliar treatments, all your, your biweekly applications, your superintendent might ask you to apply on your golf greens, get done every 10 to 14 days. That's the optimum release for urea or fast release sources. But from a turf management standpoint, we don't want the highs and lows associated with quick release necessarily. We want nice, even, consistent growth because we want our golf greens, our fairways, and our tees to play consistently. We don't want to see a surge. And not to mention, we don't want to be baling hay because we've got a month's worth of turf growth happening in a week. So the idea behind appropriate or smart fertilizer applications is slow release, spread it all out. If you compare the yellow arc with the green arc, that's a poly curve, a product out of Lesco, which is a sulfur-coated urea. Now, this is old school technology, but it does show a bit of our goals in terms of fertilizer applications. We want nice, consistent, even release. And this is just exactly what I'm talking about. This is too lean. You've got disease down here. This is poor growth, unhealthy turf. This is baling hay, and everybody's collecting clippings off the fairways because it looks like dog's breakfast. This is somewhere in the middle that we want to hang out. So too lean, and you end up spending money in disease and pain. This is baling hay, high labor costs to clean it all up, and so on and so forth. Obviously, it's not ideal. This is what we're gunning at. A nice, even, consistent, slow release response to a fertilizer. When we stay into this parameter here, we don't have any speckling, we don't have any flesh growth. Our greens roll consistently throughout the day, not just an hour after we cut them. And what this really is a result of balanced feeding. So to give you a bit of a, oh, sorry, I'm gonna check our text box here. Antonio's got a great point, Antonio. Yep, you can reduce the rate of urea. Right, you can put urea down 4600 in very, very low rates. The most immediately available nitrogen that a turfgrass plant can accept at once is 1/3 of a pound. So applying any more than 1/3 of a pound of immediately available nitrogen, whether it's urea or another similar source, it's going to result in leaching or wash away. Essentially, it's not expensive, but when we talk about eutrophication, the movement of nutrients off-site, that's what happens when you over-apply. If it doesn't burn, you probably lose it because the plant can't use it. What most clubs are doing now, you can get nitrogen into the plant through foliar means. That is to say, there's only a few. Nitrogen, magnesium can get in through the tissue of plants. That's the basis behind foliar applications. It goes in through the stomates of the plants and goes in through the epidermis, and the plant can actually utilize that immediately available nitrogen quickly without having to process it and avoid losses, which we're going to get into next. So typically a urea application at low rate would be somewhere between 1/10 of a pound to 1/3 of a pound, and it'll only last about 10 to 14 days before you've got to reapply. Now some clubs, and that a 4600 you can melt. A lot of clubs are starting to do this now by great big drum mixers. You throw in 3 or 4 bags of ag grade urea, melt it into water, and load the sprayer up and spray it all out. Very low risk because it's already mixed. Doesn't even need to be watered in, and has that foliar response at a very, very cheap cost. That's the principle. I hope that answers your question there, Antonio, about ag grade products. Any more than about 1/3 of a pound applied foliarly you're likely going to lose it. Whether it's going to volatilize or get tied up in the soil, the plant won't be able to use it. So anyway, all your fertilizer programs are based on nitrogen. You know, when we talk about what a balanced program is or what's your fertilizer program, nitrogen is the one macronutrient. Nitrogen and potassium are the 2 or 3 micros that we use the most of, N, P, and K. So we base all of our applications on nitrogen. The average golf course will apply anywhere from 2 to 4 pounds of nitrogen a year on their green. On their greens, 3 pounds maybe on their tees and fairways, even less than that on their roughs. Nitrogen is required for recuperation, right? We use it the most. We run through, hopefully, around 30,000 rounds a year on our golf greens. That's kind of the same as having a 1,000-person party in your backyard every weekend. So we've got to recover regularly. That's why we apply fertilizer. It's not so much about number, it's about recovery. So the race to the bottom is not really, you know, a lot of superintendents out there brag, oh, I only put down 2 pounds of nitrogen this year, or I'm breaking down to 1.9 pounds of nitrogen this year. That's great. What all that tells me is, well, you're running out of things to do and you don't have a lot of play. It shouldn't be about the race to the bottom. Nitrogen is super cheap, you know, between 40 and 50 bucks for a 50-pound bag of nitrogen. So of all the things we should be focusing on, nitrogen really isn't one of them if you know why you're doing it. Nitrogen will accelerate your recuperation, and of course it promotes colors as you all have seen. Those of you, how many of you are familiar with the minimum levels or minimum sustainable levels with nitrogen? This came out of the Asian Turfgrass Center about 3 or 4 years ago. A new way of thinking about the amount of nitrogen you put down. Maybe you've even seen that guy's talk, MSLN. If not, look it up. The idea is his principal, and he's PhD out of Singapore. He basically says we should be applying nitrogen based on clippings, how much we get off of it. So what they'll do is he'll ask operators to collect all the clippings off their golf greens, measure them in liters, and that ultimately defines how much nitrogen they should be putting down based on growth. In my view, that's not exactly groundbreaking. We've always been doing that. We just never recorded it. It was much more a field thing. I mean, every single day, I used to drive around and check with my greensmores. How's the greens growing today? And I'd literally grab a handful of grass out of that bucket and do a number of things. First of all, you look at volume, of course. If volume is up, then that's good. There's actively growing. Is it turgid? Is it stiff? That means we've got really good potassium levels, you know, turgidity, which is that medium macronutrient. You can't really measure root growth particularly well grabbing onto clippings, but it was a pretty good notice. If I didn't get many clippings off of mowing, I would look immediately back on my application schedule, say, when was the last time we applied? Are we beyond that 14-day period, in which case we're running low? But it would tell a tale. If we were only on our 4th or 5th day, maybe, we should still have a whole nother week left of fertility. Why would we have no growth? And then that sets off the flag. Maybe we've got disease. Maybe maybe our mowers aren't cutting correctly. We need to get them ground up. It just sets the wheels in motion to start troubleshooting what's going on. But anyway, I digress and ramble. When you're doing tissue testing to find out whether your nitrogen levels in your plant are accurate, you'll never see more than about 6%. That's on the high line. So FYI, for those of you that do tissue testing, anywhere between 3 and 6% nitrogen in your turfgrass plant is ideal. You won't be able to find nitrogen in the soil without doing a electrical conductivity test. You send basically a charge through the soil and the readings basically measure how much resistance is in the water of the soil to show you the level of mineral in there, which N gets tied up in. So that's how we measure nitrogen in the soil and its whole purpose. Now, phosphorus we talked about briefly. If you're wondering where phosphorus came from, now the Haber process produces nitrogen. The phosphorus is mined. This is a strip mine. Phosphorus, and this might be interesting for you guys who love POA as much as I do. Phosphorus never goes very far in the soil. It doesn't leach. It stays right on the surface. That's why when we mine it, look at how close to the surface we are. We're not digging thousands of meters into the earth to pull it out. It's right on the surface. So that's why plants like POA grow so well with shallow roots, because phosphorus is right at the surface. Phosphorus is necessary for root development and encourages plant establishment. So this time of year, when you're coming out of wintertime, is when you need to be throwing that phosphorus down. Don't be afraid. You know, the optics, the public perception of nutrient loading and eutrophication in our lakes and ponds that says that we're applying too much phosphorus in the soils. Well, the truth of the matter is our phosphorus, if we're applying it where we want it to, it's not going anywhere. The only thing that's adding phosphorus to our waterways is erosion. When that phosphorus goes down into the soil, it sticks to that soil colloid. Like a fat kid on Smarties, it's not going anywhere. It's right where it wants to be. So when you apply phosphorus, it never really goes away until you either wash it off the surface or the plant uses it up. So don't be afraid to use phosphorus. You're doing your soil tests every year anyway. Get it down there. Don't be afraid of putting a starter down this time of year because it's going to encourage green up. And those of you that are loving POA, you've got new growth happening, right? And POA annua is an annual plant. So it's going to recover every single year. That seed bank in the soil needs phosphorus to grow. Your applications are going to help it along and fill in those dead spots or the result of annual growth in your greens every single year. As a rule of thumb, half a pound of phosphorus every 2 weeks in the spring will get your greens back as fast as humanly possible. I can say that with with full confidence, having been through this a number of times with various properties under with 100% POA annua. It can look pretty awful in the spring sometime, but if you embrace phosphorus, realize that you're not harming the environment by applying it. It's a macronutrient, one of the 3 primary building blocks of turf growth and plant growth. Get it down there and keep applying it until your plant's reestablished. Potassium on.
Sorry, Jason, did you say half a pound of phosphorus every 2 weeks was if you're struggling with your POA greens?
Yep.
Is that what you said? Sorry, I just wanted to confirm that. I was just taking a note there.
No, absolutely. It's important that we clarify everything, you guys. Thank you. Speak up.
I tried to do a little bit of research on over application of phosphorus. Can you damage the turf by too much phosphorus?
Well, not in my opinion. When we look,
does it promote weeds? Or is that only in waterways?
Well, it's interesting you say that. Let me share something with you. There was some time ago, industry was of the opinion, we've always been in this battle with trying to stop annual bluegrass, right? So what they thought was we would stop applying phosphorus, and that would discourage annual bluegrass, therefore give creeping bentgrass or any other species we were trying to promote a hand up, thinking that because POA annua needed phosphorus more than anything else. So anyways, we stopped applying phosphorus, and what ended up happening was the POA annua established faster because we denied the plants that we wanted a macronutrient being phosphorus. So we ended up doing more harm than good. The fact is, phosphorus is a macronutrient, and you can't separate which plants choose to use it or don't. What ended up happening was we ended up stressing out our creeping bentgrass by eliminating the phosphorus macronutrient, and annual bluegrass became more adaptable to withdrawing the phosphorus that was already in the soil and ended up over-competing the bentgrass. So as far as if you consider annual bluegrass a weed, it has absolutely no bearing whatsoever. Because really you're not denying phosphorus from a specific weed or a specific plant, you're denying phosphorus from all the plants. So now all it is a race to what plant can synthesize phosphorus from the soil better than the next. So that's kind of a shot in the dark. I wouldn't recommend it. Does that help?
Yeah, so it's just that, like, if you put down a pound bi-weekly, it wouldn't damage your turf, but
no,
all the other weeds and POA and stuff would benefit much more from it.
I mean, phosphorus is needed for seed development. So if you've got seed in the soil, yeah, phosphorus is going to benefit everything that needs seed to establish, or young seedlings to establish. If the hope is when you're applying phosphorus, you've already overseeded, and you've got seed in the soil that you're trying to grow in.
Yeah, there's just no harm in kind of going heavy on phosphorus.
I've put I don't think I've ever put down more than a pound of phosphorus a year. Even down south, I think I might have put down at most 3 pounds in a year because we're overseeding. We're basically growing in the golf course every 6 months. But I've put down a pound at once, and you generally can't hurt it. It's the mix really that you're looking at. If you're going to apply a liquid source, there is a little bit greater risk there. Thiophanate is one that's particularly hot, but all that means you just have to water in it. It's not going anywhere once it hits the soil. So if you're applying a hot source, a liquid source of phosphorus, make sure you water it in. Granular sources, you're generally pretty safe. If it's a starter, you're going to have more phosphorus than you are nitrogen in it. Like a starter fertilizer would be a 12 nitrogen, maybe a 30 phosphorus, maybe a 10 potassium. It's the phosphorus is the highest element in that bag. So you just have to be careful. If you've got a 30% phosphorus bag that includes 12% nitrogen, then you're not applying so much phosphorus that the nitrogen goes through the roof, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Cool.
Hey, Jason, would you recommend applying your seed and your fertilizers right around similar times? Like you say, you want to have that phosphorus right when your seed's in the ground, so it's ready to go at the same time?
I don't think there's any great risk, great hurry. I mean, you want it, depending on your specific situation, you want to take advantage of any seed that's already in the seed bank, like for instance, if you're growing POA. But if you're solely creeping bent grass and you know that it never made it through the winter, the only way you're going to regrow is by propagation sideways through stolons and whatnot. As soon as you apply that seed, there's a germination period, right, where that seed's got to draw in all that water before that seed can burst. It's not going to be able to take in that phosphorus until it has generated a taproot or a root to begin with, and the root hairs are even in the position where they can start taking up nutrient. But that said, so really, there's no huge rush right off the get-go. But that said, the phosphorus is not going to leach away. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, okay, because we're pretty much all POA greens, so you would recommend getting the phosphorus in ASAP, and then you can overseed after you get that phosphorus in there, because then that'll get that seed bank going.
Yeah, I would get the phosphorus down right after you do your first verticut. Get your seed down and your top dressing, and throw a little bit of phosphorus down there as a starter to get her cooking. If you're full, now this is something that's worked very well for me in the past. If you're 100% POA, your seed bank is already full of annual bluegrass. So when you verticut, don't collect those clippings off. You're trying to stir up the seed bank. You want to spread that seed from the playing surface so it can see the sky and start germinating. You want to do exactly the opposite to what most other operators are doing in terms of keeping POA out. The disturbance theory. Have you guys heard of that? Not too much from the floor. The disturbance theory is, if you have a straight creeping bent grass playing surface and you go and punch it, aerate it, pull a core up, you're opening up the seed bank for all the POA that's already in the soil. So that you're giving your POA the best chance at establishment having done that core aeration. That's the disturbance theory. So the people that want to keep POA out of their creeping bent grasses greens, they avoid core aeration like the plague and just use mini tining and verticutting as opposed to pulling a core. So by that principle, if you've got full POA greens, what you want to do is you want to disturb that soil. You want to either aerate in the spring or verticut and go deep and bring all that seed head to the surface, spread that POA seed everywhere, because you can't buy POA seed, right? That's your seed bank. That's your bag of seed. It's already in the ground. So that's what I would say if you're trying to encourage annual bluegrass. Disturb the soil, load it with phosphorus, stick to that 2 week. Again, you're dropping all kinds of money. So don't think about dollars at this period of time if your greens got really hit coming out of the wintertime. Pound phosphorus every 2 weeks at about a half a pound until you see establishment. Don't you stop until it's full or until your playing surface is full.
Yeah, I know we got some work to do on our POA greens this year, but maybe tomorrow, just so we can keep things rolling, we can have a chat.
Yeah, that would be great. I welcome that, guys. And anytime, I would love to come and visit you and give you some advice. I do a lot of these visits this time of year. I'm off to Pritis on Friday, so I could be in your neighborhood. Give me a call. Don't hesitate. But yeah, we should keep going. Potassium, a little bit different. Potassium's deep in the earth. If you've ever been to Saskatchewan, you know that's where that stuff comes from. It encourages rooting and wear tolerance, enhances drought and cold tolerance. Potassium is kind of like the self-strengthening element. If you're ready to go on a big, long hike trip and you load up on carbs, this is what you want to do in terms of potassium. Before the plant goes down for wintertime or before the stress of midsummer hits, you know you're coming into 40, 45-degree weather this summer, apply some potassium. Give that plant a little a boost of energy. Now, your second and micronutrients include the secondaries, your sulfur, calcium, and magnesium. After the micros, N, P, and K, which we use the most of, the next three elements that we use the most of are going to be sulfur, calcium, and magnesium. And that's just how the plant grows. That's its tendency to use more calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. For those of us in this is a whole nother discussion about calcium and alkaline soils. Maybe we'll get into a little bit later. If somebody's got alkaline soils and have sodium problems, let's talk about that before the end of today. And these are all your micronutrients. So 13 all in total. But the micronutrients, you don't really need to, in my experience anyways, trying to simplify our world a little bit, you apply them in 1/100ths of a pound. So although they need to be part of your fertilizer program, you don't really calculate them the same way as you would a macronutrient where we're putting down 3 pounds at a time. You might be putting down 0.03 pounds a year of boron or silicone or zinc or iron. So usually they're added to your foliar package or added to your granular package, really applied in very, very small amounts throughout the summer. Now, the key, and we're going to get into foliar treatments here in a sec. Now, the key to fertilizer applications is not so much necessarily how much, but how much to keep, minimizing losses. In true reality, we lose between 40 and 70% of all the nitrogen that we apply to immobilization and volatilization. Immobilization being the microbes are synthesizing those applications of fertilizer and holding it in the soil, making it unavailable. Volatilization is the other way, where those same microbes assimilate it and expel it as exhaust. It comes right back into the atmosphere. And H2 is N2 is the nitrogen in the atmosphere, which we do get back in terms of, every time it rains, you see a slight green up. Everybody loves natural rainfall because it's got a little bit of nitrogen in it. Very small, but that's where it comes from. That's the nitrogen cycle, that fertilizer that you applied that got assimilated, or the bacteria that made it unavailable to the plant at that point, that went back into the atmosphere. You got a little bit of it back. So you should feel a little bit good about that. The other ways we can lose nitrogen is through leaching. Of course, if we over-apply, we lose about 20% to leaching, and denitrification losses at about 35%, which means denitrification means it becomes unavailable basically for use. Oh, click on the wrong page. So there's only two different ways, two different types of nitrogen that can get into the plant. nitrate, and ammonium. So when you're picking your nitrogen products, you're looking at ammonium nitrate or ammonium sulfate. You know, these are NO3 or NH4. Those are the only two types of nitrogen, forms of nitrogen, that the plant can use. So as an operator, as you know, trying to apply those fertilizers, those are ones you're looking to get the fast kick out of. And the reason why is it doesn't need to be assimilated. It can be immediately taken up. Anyway, that's the benefit of using those two types. Now, I won't go through this, but I want you guys to review this on your own. This is probably one of the best videos that I've come across explaining the nitrogen cycle and the difference between treating your turf with ammonium nitrate versus urea. You know, nitrate they both have a process of getting into the plant. Some are more effective at doing it. Urea is not really as effective depending on how you apply it. But you see, both of these processes are considering them going through the soil. Urea requires hydrolysis in order to be made available to the plant. And the ammonium needs to be denitrified by bacteria before it can be taken up by the plant. So this is, from our perspective and from you guys' perspective, this comes into play as to whereabouts in the country am I living, you know, and why it's important. Hydrolysis, if you're on the West Coast or any coast for that matter that has high rainfall, your urea applications are at terrific risk of being hydrolyzed, you know, not always as available as nitrate. For those of you that are in really healthy growing conditions, good pH, healthy microbial populations, you have a big risk of denitrification because the bacteria will hold that on you even more. So to give you an idea, in Alberta here, we don't have a whole lot of nitrification bacteria. Our pHs are not really ideal. We don't have a lot of degree days. It doesn't really get super hot in the summer. We don't get a lot of rain compared to the West Coast, BC, which is easy to grow grass in. They get tons of rain. They get lots of temperature. They get lots of bacteria growing as a result. So a nitrogen is affected differently on either side of the Rockies based on climate. So it comes into your, you've got to start thinking about how do our plants really get that nitrogen that we're applying. Anyhow, I would love for you guys to watch that on after classes over here, and because we'll keep rolling. So there's a bunch of different available nitrogen types, straight up nitrogen. Urea, of course, ammonium nitrate, ammonium sulfate. These are, I would say, ammonium nitrate and ammonium sulfate. These are, I would say, staples. Ammonium sulfate, I would apply on my course once a month. Some will tell you that it's acidifying. It does have a slight acidifying quality, but don't bet on it. You're not going to drop your pH by using ammonium sulfate, and I'll give you an idea. I applied ammonium sulfate as a staple part of my fertility program at 0.2 of a pound every month for about 7 years. And I mean, that's year-round, 12 months, right? And our pHs were 8.4, 8.5. After 7 straight years of doing that every month, our pHs dropped down to 8.4. So is it acidifying? Kind of. Not really. Don't bet the farm on it. Don't think you're going to change your pH with it. Sodium nitrate, calcium nitrate, and ammonium thiosulfate are just other different types of quickly available nitrogen you can use. And in the various products that you'll buy, you can look. If you look in the ingredients, it'll tell you what kind of nitrogen you've got in there. So and there's different advantages to both. We talked about urea already. We talked about the difference in ammonia and ammonium sulfate already. Something you guys can consider, and there's reasons why you might choose one over another, but primarily I would say generally price. Now, some of the other slowly available nitrogen sources, anything that you don't melt down or is quickly dissolvable, include some things like urea formaldehydes, methylene ureas, isobutylene diureas, which are diarrhea, is not actually available anymore in its traditional sense. You can get one from, I think Brett Young's has a new one coming out, but IBDU is really not reliant on microbes. It'll release solely with water irrigation. So that's a good one. Sulfur-coated urea, that's old school technology, of course, still available, but you can get that in a lot of ag-grade products. They're always the cheapest, but the thing about sulfur-coated ureas are sulfur is really brittle. So when you coat a urea particle with sulfur, the more it rains, the more it releases. The more you drive over it and crush that particle, the more it releases. So I'll give you an example. When I first started, we were applying sulfur-coated urea because that was the best thing there was. And I'm thinking that I'm all the big smart guy putting it all down and I get a month out at once, expecting it to release slowly over 4 weeks, which was standard. Well, that's great. So I'd go home Thursday afternoon or Friday afternoon and celebrate. All right, we're all set up for the next month. And then it would piss rain for 2 days. And I'd come back in on Monday and my whole month's worth of fertilizer was released. And it looks like a hayfield out there. So we're, clumps of grass everywhere. And now we're dragging fairways. Thankfully, we've got new products and we've got new technology now that we can put those sulfur-coated ureas to bed. What we have been able to figure out is a polymer coat. And there's some products out there that apply a polymer, plastic, to the outside of that sulfur coat to give it a little more consistent release. And what it does is, through osmosis, the same way we get fertilizer burn, it'll release just a little bit of it at a time, and a little bit as a time as it takes up water, will release a little bit of that urea at a time. So a really good release in that regard. And I would say the standard in the industry now, polymer-coated ureas is really the way to go. And organics, of course, a slow release. Earthworks, Morganite, any other organics out there you guys use that you can throw out, maybe a pig manure or a chicken manure or turkey manure product that you use? Anyone use organics?
Tony, I think in Jasper on the greens, Sustain was an organic product that we used on the greens. Didn't smell very good.
No.
Yeah.
No, but that's great. Absolutely right. There's the organics is the safest thing you can do. I mean, all those slowly available sources are pretty safe to use. You're not going to get in trouble using them. The one thing, though, about organics is organics require microbial activity to break it down. So you're never going to burn anything with organics unless you pile it, like literally make a pile and suffocate the turf underneath of it. But you're also not going to get a kick out of it in the springtime or in the fall, especially here in Alberta. If you're going to put down organics like that Sustain right now, what its best contributor to you is solar energy, solar radiation. So it's black, right? It's very dark. So it attracts light. So the sunlight's going to draw down into that area wherever you've applied it and help warm up the soil. Until your microbes start actively breaking it down, you're not really going to see a kick out of it. So organics, you could apply it anytime you want. Expect to see the result midsummer when it's the hottest. That's why in the midsummer, you should probably lean off all of your fertilizer applications, stick to the foliars and really low-level solubles because you've got microbial activity working for you. Depending on where you are, again, in the country, that varies. Obviously, Alberta, we don't get a lot of microbial activity because of the temperatures and degree days that we've got. Same reason why we don't get a lot of disease or insect pressure is degree days. So, like, we're not going to see a 40. I haven't seen a 40-degree day in Alberta here in 10 years. So, the other term that you guys have probably heard out there that might be a little confusing are the two different types of fertilizers out there. We call them both slow release, but really there's a differentiation between the two. Slow release nitrogen are long chains broken down by hot, wet weather. They rely on microbial activity to break them down. So again, this is what I mentioned earlier. East Coast, even West Coast, probably East Coast as much as West Coast to be truthful. In the mainland, Southern Ontario, where we get really hot, humid weather, high insect pressure is a good reflection that you've got high microbial activity as well. That's where your SRNs are going to work the best, or they're going to be breaking down rapidly. So that's good. The slow release nitrogen sources rely on microbial activity. So using those coastal and in Ontario are probably best where you have microbes. On the other side, in Alberta here, places that are generally don't get the degree days, any place that doesn't get a lot of insect pressure, which is a good reflection of what's going on, they are controlled release nitrogen, meaning they absorb water in order to release. So by osmosis, the same example is fertilizer burn. It draws in water, tries to equalize pressure between the particle itself and the soil or water around it, and that's what causes the slow release. So the urea diffuses into the soil. It's reliant on moisture and temperature, okay, but not so much on microbial activity. So that's the two main differences in slow release nitrogens: the no coatings, which requires microbial activity, and the coatings, which is your polymer coats, sulfur coats, and so on and so forth. Any questions there, guys? I'm ripping through this pretty quick. Typically, I would stop and ask or do an activity with you, but so please stop me if you need. So NPK coatings. You generally, if you're applying fertilizer in phosphorus terms, phosphorus is good for root growth or starter. So generally, you're not going to find a slow release phosphorus source. If you've got phosphorus in a slow release product, it's the one that's not coated. It'll be immediately available because it's not going anywhere anyhow. Your NP or your N and your K coatings, nitrogen and potassium work exactly the same way. That's why we apply, when we say what a balanced fertilizer program is, it's got equivalent amounts of N and equivalent amounts of K. So a 3, maybe 1, 3 as a fertilizer ratio would indicate a balanced program. Because nitrogen behaves just the same as potassium. They both leach. You can, at one time, arguable. I think the jury's still out on how much potassium the plant can take up at once. But you're not going to hurt the plant with potassium. You can put down sulfate of potash at 1 pound without any fear. I think the most I've ever put down was about 1.5 pounds of sulfate of potash, which was 50% of our annual requirement. So yeah, not too much of a fear of hurting anything there. Now, you guys may have heard of slow release liquid products, and this is a little bit different. These are additives that go into liquid formulations that a lot of people are using now. And there's two really different ways they work. You remember the nitrogen cycle where we had urea on the right side and we had ammonium nitrate on the left-hand side, and how they each react in the soil. The stabilizing nitrogen additives work exactly the same way, where we're trying to, in the case of urea, we're trying to slow down the rate of hydrolysis, which is a result of losses through volatilization and denitrification, where we have the other side coming from the urea side, where the bacteria result in losses. So you remember there's two different ways where we're going to losing nitrogen, one from one side of the spectrum versus the other. Urea, we're trying to slow down its absorption of water, and from the other side, we're trying to slow down the nitrification bacteria. So those are what the basis behind the two additives go. So very important, you know where you're coming from, part of the world. If you're going to apply a stabilizing additive to an ammonium product in the Rockies right here, where we have very little bacteria, it's not going to work for a pail of beans. So your supplier better know the difference, and if not, you certainly should. So as an example, in BC, again, with high microbial populations, you want to try to inhibit bacteria because that's where the bacteria are hanging out. In Alberta, hydrolysis is really our big way of releasing because we don't have the bacteria. So you're going to be using stabilizers in that regard in Alberta to inhibit or slow down the rate of hydrolysis. And there's a link there at the bottom there if you want to read a little bit more. I've talked a little bit about earthworks here already. Again, very, very, very safe, but they are expensive. You know, they can be. Applying earthwork or applying an organic, I wouldn't waste your time putting down any less than ½ pound at a time. A 0.2 pound of earthworks is just a waste. You're not going to really even see that kick up. So if you're going to do it, put a bunch down, half a pound to a pound. In Banff, we put down a pound of actual nitrogen of I think it was Earthworks at the time, which was black. Like, I mean, it left a layer on the surface because we wanted to heat up the soils in the spring. So again, you can't hurt it. But think about volume there, half a pound, and we'll do the math really quick here again. Your organics here only hold about half a pound of nitrogen, or sorry, your organics, me talking too fast, are typically, as far as the analysis go, 0.05. The nutrient analysis on the bag is like 543 usually, so which is equivalent to 5% nitrogen. So if we want to apply, let's call it a pound of nitrogen using a 5% bag, you go 1, which is your rate, divided by analysis, 0.05, 5%, giving you 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet that you'd have to apply. So if you're applying it to all your golf greens, you need 2,000 pounds of Earthworks to get that nutrient down on your greens. To give you a perspective, that's an entire pallet of organic to get a half or a pound of nitrogen down versus the 5 or 6 bags of a synthesized product that you would use. So from a labor standpoint, from a cost, how much is 40 bags worth versus 5 or 6 bags? You're going to have to do the math, and that's your job as turf managers. Questions there, guys? None heard? Okay. So we've talked about granular sources, slow release sources. We've touched on foliar sources and liquid sources with the inhibitors in there, the stabilizing agents, also come in a jug. Solubles is one other way you can get fertilizer down, an easy way and an affordable way. This is like the 20-20-20 that you might have seen. This picture is specifically 20-20-20 from Plant Products. I used to use this and mix it with my wetting agent. It needs to be watered in. That's the only way it'll be able to get taken up by the plant. So I used to mix it with wetting agent because wetting agent would pull it through the surface, through the thatch, and get it right to the roots where I wanted it. So I got a great kick in just a day or two. The same rates would apply, 1/3 of a pound of nitrogen every 10 to 14 days. Yeah, it's a great, inexpensive top-up, easy to spray, very low risk. I just water it in afterwards to make sure it gets down into the roots. It's not really going to burn you. And if you wait until rain, fine. It'll still work the same. But if you want to get a kick out of it, give it a little bit of water. Certainly if you apply it with wetting agents, because wetting agents will steal all the moisture from your leaf blade. If you've ever forgot to water something in, or what happened to me one time at Lionhead, we've sprayed all 36 holes with wetting agent, and then our irrigation system crapped out and everything went red. Nothing died, but it's stressful on the plant if you have to leave that wetting agent on there. In hindsight, well, everything you learn every single year. In hindsight, I think I would have tested the irrigation system, or as a backup plan, maybe plan to spray that in the rain. But anyhow, solubles are made to melt or made to dissolve. So they're very, very easy. You don't need a great big mixing tank for some of your solubles, if that's what they're made for, unless you're using them in big, high volumes. To give you an idea, a bag of that Plant Products, that 20-20-20, 50-pound bag, I would pour it right into the sprayer screen. You take the top off and you've got that screen. I pour the entire bag into that screen and then water it in until it disappears. It works pretty good. Again, rapid response, short duration, between 10 and 14 days. It doesn't depend on temperature to a great extent, relatively stabilized. So getting into foliar feedings, and this is going to lead us into our talk with regards to research at the station. Foliar feeding works in 2 ways. You can see at the bottom here, this is the stomates. These are the tiny little breathing apparatuses of the turfgrass plant. So the principle behind foliar feeding is to get fertilizer in that way as opposed to in through the roots. And it does work. There is some argument on how much gets in through the epidermis here. Nanotechnology is starting to come out, is entering into the fertilizer world. We've got a product in research station right now that uses nanotechnology, which is microscopic particle sizing. So they think that can get right through the cuticle, which is, anyway, that's ongoing. But the beauty about foliar feeding is it ignores or circumvents the losses. Remember me telling you that we lose about 40 to 70% of fertilizer through volatilization and denitrification. This bypasses the soil. So we don't have to give a shit about what's going on underneath it. We don't care about microbes breaking it down. We don't care about hydrolysis because we're going right to the source. We're getting it right into the plant where we want it. So subsequently, because we have such great, you increase your absorption so greatly, we can apply ultra low rates. 1/10 of a pound is way too much, 10 times as much. So we put down 1/100th of a pound. So your nitrogen rates, when you apply those foliar products, are 0.002 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Very, very low. The idea behind, there's a bit of a discrepancy between how much gets absorbed and how much loss. But we argue that there's less than 2% loss of all your applications in foliar methods. The idea is exactly the same. We can count on osmosis. That's physics. An area, or when you have a product or a mineral in an area of high concentration beside an area of low concentration, natural tendency by physics is to equalize pressure, just the same as when you open up a helium balloon in the atmosphere. It desperately wants to equalize with the pressure around it. So this works the same way with foliar nutrition. We put it on the surface of the plant. It contacts that ratio of water inside the plant and just wants to diffuse, wants to equalize pressure. So that's why foliar feeding gets into the plant so well. There are some organic agents that help penetrate. Organics are great in that you guys know about the waxy cuticle on all your leaf blades. It helps with defending itself. Water and oil don't mix, or water and wax don't really mix. So the organic chelating agents is what they add to some of these things to bypass that waxy bit. It's a bit of wax, essentially. So you can get oil into oil, or wax into wax in this case, but not necessarily water into wax. So the chelating agents help to do that, kind of bridge that epidermal layer. And that's why we celebrate how well they work, really just to get you through that cuticle. But ultimately, we're circumventing any problems in the soil or any losses associated with pH or otherwise by using foliar feeding. Any questions here, guys? Foliar feeding's definitely been widely adopted by a lot of the industry. The deal, though, is, and that I don't think enough operators do this, yes, we lose 40 to 70% for granular, but foliar feeding is wicked expensive. Between $200 and $300 for every foliar application every 2 weeks. So if you want to apply foliar treatments and you say, oh, well, that's the best way and it's the smartest way, well, that's fine and dandy, but I can compare your $20,000 foliar feeding program on your greens to my $2,000 granular feeding or soluble program on my greens, and there's no way you'll be able to tell the difference. So I think at some point, this is where, as an industry, we need to get a little bit more, superintendents, I should say, need to be a little bit more accountable and understand how the hell nitrogen gets into the plant and all these different products and how they work. Because let's face it, some of these suppliers, they're in it to make money. So, and it's okay. Foliar feeding is good, but maybe we don't need to apply it as much as we are. And that's where the research took us this last year. Some of the products that are out there commonly, Gary Griggs is a staple. If you guys haven't heard of it or used it already, this guy and this product has been around the longest, most proven. I've used this myself, and I tell you what, you can, when you've got a big tournament coming up, or you've got a pro-am or a televised event happening in June, and you don't want to worry about anything, take a little bit off the stress plate, so to speak. That's when I pull the foliar products out and worry about what needs to be worried about. The foliar products will take care of the rest. The way they work it out is, you see, this is the base product, they call it, the Gary's Green, and this is just one example. 18% nitrogen, 3% phosphorus, 4% potassium. What they ask you to do is they ask you to mix it with any number of their sub-products or their partner products based on where you are in the country. You know, nitrogen is going to work regardless, foliarly, but your the availability of nutrients in your specific location varies. Your soil test will tell you what's really going on. So they've got a whole battery of different products called, I think there's Carbplex, Ultraplex, Silcal B, a number of different complementary formulations that they expect you to use in conjunction. And I use the Ultraplex to just give you an example. You notice the 19% nitrogen, 18% potassium, it's still balanced. N and K are equivalent. This is a balanced fertilizer program from a foliar standpoint. So that's what they're doing with the foliar products, and they're very, very smart. The beauty about this, and I think it's in some ways been reason for some complacency in industry, is, you know, if you've got 110, 120,000 square feet of greens, anywhere in that ballpark, which were pretty predictable, 18 holes. After you do the math, you know, they suggest putting so many ounces per 1,000 square feet in. It's very, very convenient. One jug of the Gary's Green works out conveniently with one jug of the Ultraplex for a 2-week treatment. So as a superintendent who's maybe new to foliar products or new to the whole process, or somebody who can't do the math period and doesn't want to rely on their own math skills, can go right to this foliar line and say to anybody, if they can drive the sprayer, they can figure this out. Okay, one jug of the Gary's Green, one jug of the Ultraplex this week, guys, and you're gone. So it can be very, very easy. The results are obvious. They bypass any problems with the soil. So all of a sudden you have a very, very simple application strategy, and you bypass any negative things that could be going on in the soil. What do you know? Perfect greens. As I mentioned before in that comment about growing grass on the side of your car is actually quite true. With foliars, that's the one thing you can do. The water, of course, is a bit of an exaggeration, but the foliars will teach you how to or will bypass anything going on at the root level. And this is why your foliar programs work so well. Minimizing losses, circumventing soil problems. What can I say? You can grow just about anywhere with foliars. Now, one thing before I jump into the PTRC here, if you talk to an unbiased person, an agronomist, I guess like myself or somebody else, and they'll ask you, should I go with all foliar or should I go with granular? Some of the best superintendents have a balance, because the thing about going all foliar is it's sort of all or nothing. You're not preparing your plant for what could happen. You're not preparing it for the stresses out there. If your sprayer, for instance, craps out on you and you miss a 2-week period, you got nothing in the soil bank as a backup. So the best balance, in my opinion, is have a granular program supplemented by a foliar program. Use them, you know, use a little bit of granular, use a little bit of soluble, use a little bit of foliar, understanding when they work the best and why you're using them that way. The all or nothing, or the one tool to fix it all, is generally not a good procedure. When you think about building a house, you can't just build a house with a hammer. You need all kinds of different tools. Think of that the same way in terms of growing your golf greens. Don't just fall back on foliars, because they don't give you a whole lot of backup plan. Any questions, guys, so far? All right, none heard. Moving on here, guys. For those of you, I wish, like I said, I wish we could be on site here, and I could walk you down to the turf plots. But anyways, I'll walk you through as best I can here. So there's the Pomeroy, right? There's Land Sciences here. The PTRC, if you take the road back out of the parking lot here, out the side, past the hotel, and there's the ring road that goes around. There's the landscape pavilions on the far right-hand side there. If you keep coming down this way and then take a left east of campus, that takes you to the PTRC. So here we are. There's your ring road this area here is now the wetland and botanical garden area, and this was the turf grass. This is the research station now. It used to be here. You recall this is where the Pomeroy used to be. There's all of our turf grass plots. When they wanted to move the hotel there, for obvious reasons, it's high profile, location, all that. We said, fine, you can have our turf plots. We'll relocate them, but you're going to allocate this piece of land, which was much, much larger. They actually allocated all this to us. This is all that we needed at the time. That's all the projects that we had on the go at the time. So we relocated, put in new installs, rebuilt the place with California-style golf greens in this new location here. This is the ag shop, if that helps. Compost center, I think this is the compost center. That's the compost center. Either way, side by each, that's where the PTRC plots are now. We increased the size from original, I think it was 2,000 square feet to 7.4 hectares, which is that whole gigantic area. There's actually a flipped version. There's our whole plot area. We've got 200. Clarify what California style is. You guys didn't talk about California style golf greens in construction class?
It was mentioned, but I couldn't find any research on them.
It's completely sand-based with no gravel layer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically it. There's 3 really USG, and I've got a great video actually. I wish anyway, I'll tell you. You've got 3 different main types of golf greens constructed. The old school USGA type with your sand layer, then you've got your choker layer, then you've got your gravel layer below it and the drainage. That was established back in the 60s before we had really good tools on how to screen and bridge and mitigate the migration of your sand into the gravel. So they basically did a 3-step approach: small, medium, large. And that mitigated or slowed down the migration of your sand into the drainage layer. In time, we got a little bit smarter and decided, hey, if we can do the math right, and if we can screen this appropriately, we can avoid that choker layer by bridging your sand, the greens growing medium, right over top of your gravel layer where your drainage sits. So that was good. Saved golf courses about 40 grand over the course of building the whole place, right? Not having to put that choker layer in, which was a super big pain in the ass, even from a construction standpoint. All that. Actually, I got a video you should check. If you ever check my YouTube website, there should be some good videos in there. I'll make sure it's posted. Make a note. I'll try to take care of that after class, guys. So anyway, that's the second. We got smart. We figured out how to bridge. I used to teach golf course construction too. That course I gave to Dave. We spent a lot of time about understanding how bridging factor works and all that kind of stuff. Now, as time went on and we kept on building and trying to figure out cheaper ways of building things, coastal areas, they started to experiment with the California style. And what that is there's no gravel at all. It's just sand profile right down to the base layer, graded accordingly. And then your drainage lines are cut right into the base. So you've got, so you can see my screen. So this is what it looked like. You had your greens profile, turf up top. I don't know if you can see that. You can see turf up top. There's the entire growing medium sand here, and there's your drainage channel at the bottom. So there's no gravel whatsoever except in this lower channel at the bottom of the construction spec. Does that make sense? Sorry for the kind of a quick scratch pad version. Anyway, that's California style. And the reason why they adopted it, it came into the coastal regions of east and west seaboards where they had tons and tons of rainfall. The principle behind the choker layer, the gravel layer, the bridging is to perch the water table, to hold the water in that top 12 inches or so, 12, 14 inches, in order to make it available for the plant. If you get a ton of rainfall, you're not trying to hold the water in the profile. Most of the time, you're trying to move it out. So they designed the California style, California, West Coast, Western Seaboard there, to move water out of the profile as fast as possible and not hold it. That's kind of the principle behind California. Any questions there? Does that answer your question there, Antonio?
Yeah. From what I understood about the perched water table, though, was there was a good balance. Like if there was eventually too much water, then the cohesion and adhesion factors would kind of move in gravity's favor, and then the water would be flushed.
Yeah. The way it works is, and again, I've got this on my YouTube channel, a great video on the movement of water. Absolutely right. When you have a perched water table, water won't move through into a different particle size until gravity exceeds capillary strength. So you've got the water pressure in the growing medium side, and that sand growing medium layer, held together with capillary strength, adhesive and cohesive forces in between those particles holding it there. Until you keep plowing water to it, the cohesive, which is if you look at two particles holding each other together, if this is one particle and this is another particle, I'm making another drawing here, guys.
I think some of the research I found, Tony, like California style also creates a perched water table, even without the gravel layer, but it drains from capacity faster than what the USJ style drains.
So if in a California style, if you don't have anything other than the base gravel or the base clay layer at the bottom, the clay, you could say, does perch it to a certain extent. But because of the depth, it still will draw it all out. The point behind it all, the whole thing, is to move water out. So again, here's another stupid picture for you guys. If I can see if I can find, got to be able to see make sure I'm showing it to you. Okay, so if you see the two lines on the outside here, this is, say, the wall of your sand particle or soil particle. The adhesive forces, which are the strongest, tightest bonds between the soil particles, are adhesive particles. The weakest ones are the cohesive ones right here in the middle. So the cohesive water particle holds, basically holding hands with your adhesive side. That's the cohesive side. The cohesive water particle is what's available to your turfgrass plant. Adhesive water isn't. Think about, if you think of clay soils, there's very little pore space in between all those particle sizes. The majority, almost all the water in a clay soil is adhesive, held very, very tight to that clay particle, and is unavailable to plants. You know, even though a clay soil holds way more water than a sand does, there's more available water in a sand profile than there is in a clay profile because of that cohesive, because of the pore space. There's more water held between those two cohesive forces than alone. Does that make any sense to you guys? I kind of raced through that, but that's the principle behind water availability in sand soils.
Yeah, that was all great. Thanks.
I'll try to update my web page. Man, oh man, I wish we had more time. I would love to I wish we had another 2 weeks, you guys. We'll dig in. Maybe we'll do a little bit more of this in the summertime, you know, in our field schools. Maybe we should do like a weekly lecture like this. When we can talk about agronomics and talk about soils and this kind of stuff. I think I'm going to incorporate that. I really want to talk to you guys more about the agronomic side. Anyhow, so moving on here, this is our PTRC plots. You can see them all finished on the bottom. The back plot here, this is USGA. This is 2,000 square meters or 20,000 square feet, or sorry, 2,000 square meters of greens type. That's USGA. 1,000 square meters of it is USGA spec, and 1,000 square meters of it is soil. We've got 1,000 square meters at fairway height, and we've got Kentucky bluegrass everywhere. So you can see we've got a this is an A series bent. And back here we actually have Poa reptans, where the fall fertility project took place. The guys are just putting up our drought shelters in the background. This is a annual bluegrass green on soil, and this is a blend of A, G, and T series bents. Those are the most aggressive types of bent grasses blended together in another soil-based profile. So we've got what we hope to have, every different kind of growing type that you guys would experience on golf course. Now here we are. Time has passed a little bit. The constructed wetlands are complete, and what happens is this place is intended to absorb or bring in all the runoff water from all campus hard surfaces into this facility. And as you may have talked about already, it runs through a series of channels to purify itself, ultimately coming into this big holding pond. If it's not clean enough, obviously it's not clean enough in this example, it gets pumped right back to the beginning and cycles through again, at which point we irrigate from it. That water, it's tested now before it gets into this big pond, so they circulate it before it gets here. I think this is the second last tailing pond. Anyway, by the time the water gets is clean enough, then it gets piped into this one. That's what we irrigate the plots with. So give you guys an idea, that allows us to do some testing in terms of water quality and how to apply remedial practices to shitty irrigation water, which is one of the biggest things we have to deal with these days. In 2014, we got $2.3 million from the National Sciences and Engineering Council to proceed in 13 studies in 5 different themed areas. So it was the largest that the college ever got in terms of turf research, and that was I was involved with that grant writing back in 2013 with my predecessor Jim Ross, who was also the CEO of the research center. These were the projects that were funded by the government. So we've done about 3 of them. I'm doing a bunch still right now. We're reporting on 5 more this year, and the remainder of them are coming in the days ahead. We do research days every summer. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we had to cancel this year. But this is typically what we would do. We have it up to 175 people coming down to the plots to see what we're up to. Research projects on the go, a little bit of education, a little bit of discussion and whatnot. This on the bottom left is one of my pet projects, an annual bluegrass trial where we had sourced perennial types of annual bluegrass, and we're growing them out to test the effects of seeding, what was happening from an evolutionary standpoint to perennial POA when it's taken out of that perennial environment. So anyway, some of the stuff that are particularly close to my heart. We do field days, not just at campus, but we do them all over the place. This was up in Edmonton. We did a field day. This is up in Edmonton again. I believe this was Red Deer, and this was a school out of BC. That's Jason Hooper there doing a first screen activity for us. Now the PTRC, so we run on a very little, about $200,000 a year. We pay our PhD a good chunk of that, and Mark Anderson is our seasonal employee, and myself. We run half of our expenses run from service contracts. In terms of research, that is, if Syngenta or Bayer or BASF comes to us and says we want to do a design or a fungicide test, that's where we get a lot of our contracts from. The rest of it comes from membership dues of the Alberta Turfgrass Research Foundation. So those of you, when you get back out in industry and you're asked to become members of the Turfgrass Research Foundation, that membership dues, which ranges to between about $200 and $600, depending on the size of your facility, goes towards turfgrass research completely. So anyhow, for the next 5 years, I've got my work cut out for me in terms of focusing on deliverables and that kind of stuff. But there's the finished product. That's what the plots look like now. We've got drought trials over here, varietal trials over here, and over here was a traffic tolerance trial, fescue trial over here. We had a load of drought-tolerant species varietal trials in here. And of course, these are the various greens. There's the USGA bent. There's the USGA POA reptans, US or soil-based POA and soil-based bent mix. Yeah, we represent a bunch of different areas. We're not just golf, the ATRF, that is golf, sports turf, parks and recs, sod growers, municipalities. I'm up. I just got a call yesterday. I'm up to Edson to do some work for 24 sports fields up there. So to give you an idea, we're not just golf. For those of you guys going into various other sectors, you can always count on us to help. Yeah, that's not really typical. So right this time of year, I get lots of calls to try to help clubs figure out what went wrong this winter. I got a call from Pritis yesterday. I'm headed over there on probably Friday to see what happened over there. But they lost some turf in their rough this year, so we got to try to figure out whether it was those sports fields and Edson baseball fields. Yeah, Nolan, there's like 24 of them. I haven't been to, I don't have the scope of the project in front of me or anything yet. Like I said, I just brand new, but hope to head up there. Not too bad. The RFP just came out. So yeah, I'll let you know how that goes for sure. Anyway, right now I get lots of calls when you guys get back to the golf course and you're trying to deal with the various problems that you had through the winter. Oftentimes I'll head out and give you guys some advice on, first of all, figuring out what disease you've got. You can see here there's incarnata, gray snow mold, and you've got pink snow mold here down at the bottom. Typhulus species vary depending on what's going on. To me, this says the black sclerotia here, the overwintering fruiting bodies of gray snow mold, usually mean you had a good winter cover, or you had lots of darkness, which suggests you had a good snow cover. Not too much desiccation would have happened at this place. Here, pink snow mold happens generally in the fall. You get a lot of it. Or if you have an open winter, that is, you don't have a lot of snow, you can still get pink snow mold a lot more than gray snow mold, if any at all. So anyways, what I do when I cruise around is we'll determine what happened, what kind of disease you've got and why. So if you have, for instance, a great deal of pink snow mold, in this case, I think this was Didsbury Golf Club. Their timing for their fungicide applications didn't go very well. They applied too early. As you know, we had an early year, and this would have been last year, and so they got smoked pretty hard. Gray snow mold, well, the jury's still out that what happened there, but that's just an example. These are some of the when I come out to do a field test for you, I'll give you a several-page report explaining exactly what you had, exactly what happened, and these are real on-course results to prove what we've got. So, yeah, we do strategic planning, business planning. This was an interesting one in Calgary, a sports field, a brand new one, New Brighton, that didn't have any quality control. They built it, and they're wondering why it didn't work. Well, it didn't have a reasonable growing, medium growing profile. Long story short, this was another one out of where the hell were we? Anyway, someplace west. I think it was west of the city. Do you see these little patches here? They had snow mold down. They had everything was looking great. What ended up happening here was the first time I've ever seen it. They used flax to kind of provide an insulation. And these, because we had a really, really cold year that year, we found out that this wasn't diseased. The whole thing was sprayed. This was low temperature kill in spots where the flax wasn't deep enough, and we had minus 40-degree weather, and that turf just was killed based on just straight up low temperature injury. So that was a unique one for me. I'd never seen that quite before, but goes to show the importance of consistency in insulations, especially in Alberta when we have such cold winters. This was an example of another club that clearly got smoked with two different types of problems here. Hopefully none of you guys are looking at this spring. This is, I would say, definitely killed. A little bit of surviving turf, but for the most part gone. You can see this line here. Nothing really happens in straight lines that we do ourselves. This is a result of desiccation here. the wind blowing across the screen. It wasn't covered. We had an open winter, and the water relationship in the crown was drawn completely out and dried up and died. That's what killed it. We also had a little bit of pink snow mold, which is the obvious pink tinge mixed in. You can see it's a little more over there, but no gray snow mold at all on this green because we didn't have any snow cover, and gray snow mold doesn't happen unless you have snow cover. So there's a few telltale things that we can help you guys figure out. The big statement that I usually tell everybody when you guys are looking to invest in research or replace or renew your membership, you guys should know that we lose our facilities regularly and on purpose. Because we're trying to find solutions for you. So when you come to the turf grass plots and you see this, we're working for you. So we don't. It's not that we don't know how to grow grass. We're trying to test every possible solution for you. Any questions, you guys? It's about 11 o'clock. Does anybody want to take? Would you mind if I take 2 seconds and just fill up my coffee cup, get a drink, and then we'll carry on. I'll just answer the chat box before we do. Polyreptans is low mold creeping bluegrass. Yes, that's right. It can survive at green site. That's what we put down on. That's what we're doing in this fall fertility treatment. Polyreptans came from it's creeping bluegrass. Essentially, we're mowing it at 3/16, which is pretty standard. 140 on the meter, and yeah, this is where our foliar testing is going through. What I think it's going to lead to, the results, is testing onto bent grass in this foliar way. But again, I'm going to take 2 seconds, just go get another coffee, come back down, and then carry on into PTRC research. So lots of talking, guys. I hope that's okay on your end. Take 5, stretch your legs for 2 seconds, and I'll be right back and jump right into PTRC research, okay? Everybody still there? Awesome. Yep. Cool. All right, guys, let's keep going. Thanks for that break. I just had to get a drink. I was choking up a bit. Okay, so all this talk about fertility and foliar treatments is it's been kind of a thorn. I won't say a thorn, but it's been something that's been bugging me for quite a while, and I think it's a result of just the realization there's a misunderstanding in terms of foliar treatments in industry, or rather we need to learn more about it, how well they work, when they work. The trend to move to foliar treatments, nothing wrong with it, of course. I've explained why. Operators are using foliar treatments beyond the middle of the summer. Now they're spraying earlier in the season and late in the season, under the presumption that foliar treatments, without needing or having any losses, you're helping the plant out, building carbohydrate and everything else. So we decided to propose a study in 2013 to see, to kind of test that theory. Are we building more carbohydrate? And I'll share you with you my perspective here. I've been through lots of winters, and this isn't my course, but this is very indicative of the greens that how our greens would come out every spring, because I think we had a very, very good plan that I adopted from my mentor up in Whistler and carried it on pretty much since then. The idea behind it was, or is, before your turfgrass plant goes into winter, you know, the plant never dies. It stays alive. It's still respiring. And that's why it's very important that we, you know, don't lose it with ice damage or ice cover. We got to allow it to keep breathing. But in the absence of light, the plant's not photosynthesizing, therefore it's not generating energy, so it's burning energy. So by that principle, I use the analogy of the hibernating bear. In order to give your turf the best chance of getting through the wintertime while in hibernation, you've got to pack it full of carbohydrate or sugars, which is the same thing from a plant perspective, in order to get it through and maximize its survival. You know, just like a bear, if it doesn't get enough in the fall, in the middle of its sleep or the middle of the winter, it wakes up and says, Jesus, I'm going to starve to death if I don't find some food. And then it wakes up and it's like, there is no food, and then fails. It's exactly the same way turf works. When it's under ice or it's under snow, there is no chance for it to get any more energy. It can't see the sky. It can't photosynthesize. It's completely hardened. The soil temperature, the ambient temperatures are way too low for it to start working, so it essentially dies if it runs out of energy. And the old school mentality was always, well, we've got to harden the plant off. Stop feeding it. Stop watering it. Convince it to go into wintertime. Make sure it's protected. Well, what a bunch of idiots we were. And this is, again, where I'm talking a while ago, but to try to think that we could manipulate plant growth just by stopping doing stuff, because really that's the only factor that we can do. We stop watering it, we stop fertilizing it, and we think we're preparing it best to get into winter, when in actual fact we're really setting it up for failure. So over over time we started to get a little bit better, and that example on the right there is exactly what we've come to learn in terms of carbohydrate storage and maximizing carbohydrate before getting into the wintertime. To give you an example, I would put down about 70 to 80% of all my annual nutrition in the fall every year for the purpose of packing carbohydrate. So that is to say, half a pound of organic, right? That was for solar energy. A pound of isobutylene diurea, IBDU, which is hydrolysis release, not slow release of microbes, because in the fall, microbes aren't working right, so you can't rely on them. That's the same advantage of using organics in the fall. You know it's not going to release. It's only microbial activity, so I was using it for solar radiation. The hydrolysis release type of nitrogen at a pound. Now this is late October, middle to late October, while the ambient temperature is starting to drop. I mean, you guys can relate. The plant's not actively growing. We're not mowing 7 days a week anymore. So ambient temperature is automatically telling the plant to start changing its behavior, stop growing upwards. But the soil temperature is still reasonable. It's still between 10 and 15 degrees, so actively growing. So the plant has a physiological disposition to react to the climate around it. So what it starts doing is reallocating its energy. You notice in the fall, even though you're not mowing every day, if your plant's healthy, it's still bright green. the color is a reflection of the pigment that comes out of the chloroplasts, showing that your plant is actively photosynthesized, it's actively working, right? If it's photosynthesizing, it's storing energy, which is exactly what we need to do every fall to build that energy up in preparation for falling asleep, if you get my drift. Every spring, the plant, what it will do when it's burning out energy, still respiring, it's just whittling down that energy bank, and hopefully there's enough left for it to make it to emergence in the spring or dehardening. So anyways, this has been well proven with granular studies. We started a granular study at the PTRC first. And although I think there's more work to do in terms of how much we can apply, like I say, I always used to apply 1.5 pounds every fall. The question was, why did it work so well? Would 1 pound work as well? Would 0.5 pound work as well? How much is too much? And in my opinion, nitrogen is pretty cheap. I'm not going to. It's not a money thing. I'm trying to keep my greens alive better than anything else. So in that regard, I would overdo it, knowing that if the nitrogen's mobile, if the plant can't use it, we're just going to lose it. And maybe that's not the right way to look about it, with leaching and all that volatilization and all that sort of stuff. But I figured, hey, who gives a shit if we lose it? I'm going to over apply and make sure that we can maximize regardless of the losses. I'm expecting losses, but that's okay. That's why I'm putting down so much. So anyways, we went into we started the research project using granular methods and found that anything less than 0.5 pound of nitrogen and 0.5 pound of potassium was resulted in lesser dehardening and lesser quality coming into the spring. So that research is available on the PTRC website to validate this whole discussion. So try to please don't stop watering. Make sure that there's sufficient water in the soil before you go into wintertime. And applying less than 0.5 pound of nitrogen, 0.5 pound of potassium in late fall granular ways. And we've talked about what kind of granular ways or what kind of fertilizer ways to do it should be the principle. That being said, what type of ways was done granularly? Does foliar applications in the fall do the same thing? Can we apply and maximize carbohydrate storage using foliar treatment in the fall just as good as granular and still avoid those losses? You can see where I'm getting at this. It does raise a bit of a hypothesis, and that's what generated the research project in the first place. So here we are on at the PTRC. You can see we set up a completely randomized design, which we'll go over a little bit later on the Polareptan site. This is before all applications. This is kind of like bare bones. You can see this is how a plot is set up. Right in here, this is the experimental region, and in between here, and this is just to keep them apart. As an operator, generally, or a researcher, you generally walk in between here to try to avoid the plots and avoid anything that like a independent variable that could affect the treatment or the outcome. So, but anyways, and you can see in the distance, we've got some snow mold treatments going on up here, set up the exact same way. These were some service contracts that Manuel's doing, and this was mine in the fall fertility program. So what we went ahead and did is we, because we're doing this in the fall, we're getting ready for winter, we flagged the corner, the bottom right-hand side of every single experimental plot and numbered it, 3, 4. Now those just happen to be side by each, but this one went 4, 11, 10. You know, you can see this is a completely randomized design, but we have to keep track of which plot is which in order to spray them accordingly. So the foliar treatments that we did, there's Mark, our turf tech, and you might wonder what this is all about. This is our mixture. This is what goes into your spray tank. Because we're talking about very, very small treatments, we use a CO2 contraption that's attached to a 2-liter bottle and runs through this valve system to apply just small amounts. Because we can't possibly use a full-size sprayer for stuff like this. We use specialized equipment. So anyway, the idea behind setting up this trial was to apply different rates of nitrogen and potassium in order to determine the effects of fall foliar applications on turf grass. And I'll read the objective right out to you. And I've posted it into the website as well. But the objective here was to determine if fall-applied foliar nitrogen and potassium has an effect on cold hardiness of the Poa reptans green. To determine, and the second objective, to determine if 2 foliar liquid applications applied as part of a fall fertility program with varying rates of nitrogen and potassium would improve cold hardiness and promote superior spring recovery. So this is an example of applied research, hands on the ground, and the stuff that really gets me going, because this is the stuff that you guys can take back to the field immediately and apply it right away. It's not going into crop science. It's not going into a scientific journal. Nobody's using it to pump up their PhDs or the letters behind their name. This is what we're doing for industry to better ourselves, to produce a better product. So anyway, that was the principle behind the treatment. The trials are in small. Question from Nolan here, just to pause. Since the trials are at such small locations, would it be harder to control the variables like pressure? Honestly, this is pretty good. The standard pressure, we control pressure with these gauges. Honestly, it's not really been an issue. That's just a 3-nozzle plot, and we design these treatment sizes in accordance with our application unit. So any smaller than that, I think there's too many outside variables, like the traffic in between, that could play a role. Great question there, Nolan. The other thing about doing research projects like this is we employ multiple replications, if you remember from the quiz. In this case, for every application we made, we had 16 treatments altogether. Being control, we had 4 different application rates of N and K, but we replicated them 4 times. So you can see on this whole green, these are all our plots. There were 64 treatments. So what Mark's applying here to plot number 8 would also be laid out in the experimental plan to apply that. Maybe it was treatment number 6 and plot number 12. So we would have 4 replications of that same rate before changing the rate or the parameter. And that way, the idea is we have 4 different treatments to compare for similarities or differentiation. Does that make sense? The idea to how we applied these fall treatments, where we had 4 applications laid out, August 27th right through till October 15th, 10 to 14 days apart, which is as we've discussed, how the maximum that a plant can use in a 2-week period, about 1/3 of a pound being the maximum. At least that's what we believe. But we know that no matter how much you put down, after 14 days, she's done. So that was the principle behind the timing of those applications. And of course, the treatments varied N and NK. We did tissue testings before, and then we did tissue testings afterwards to make sure we were that we could correlate our sprays with volumes. So after we spray these plugs and finish all the treatments, we process them. So in this case, we took out just with a cup cutter, took plugs out and separated them into test tubes, and we dehard them. We manufacture a dehardening. So that is, it's kind of like controlling the experiment to a certain extent. Although it's happening outside, we want to compare it to a controlled environment to see if that played a role. So we took the same. Out of here, there were over 500 different samples that we ran through artificial hardening in order to determine any differences between real and like artificial and natural. You can see this is antifreeze in here. We can drop with this unit, we can drop it's called a circulating bath. We can drop the temperature to whatever we want it to be, way below 0. And we can do it by timers. We can say for the first hour at -2, for the second hour -4, and so on and so forth. We can really control how this works. So we basically harden up the plant artificially in order to compare it to what happened out in the field. Then, of course, we take them all out. After they've been through the hardening process, we take them back out, and then we regrow them to see how those plots reacted to the dehardening. Again, this is artificial. So you can see here What can anybody tell me? Take a shot at what you think this row might have been in terms of the experimental methods. What treatment would that be out of all those plots? Nobody wants to venture a guess? That's the control
baseline. Yeah,
that's
control.
Exactly. That's right. It is the baseline. That's your, or what we would call the control, right? So you've got to have one variable or one treatment that isn't affected by any of your factors. So in that case, that that turf didn't run through the baths, or it was set at 0. So hardening was, you know, the drop in temperature wouldn't have affected those. Therefore, we know, and it's a way for us to know that the turf wasn't already dead when we began this. Do you know what I mean? It takes out that one factor, so we can say, yes, these were legitimately, because we've got growth in all of these, it shows that the samples were viable when they went into the baths, and so we can eliminate that factor, as opposed to saying, oh, well, they were dead when they went in there, no wonder they all failed. So that's the principle behind these, and that was our first LT50 test. LT50, it's the same as your pesticide class, LD50. Lethal LD50 is lethal dose to kill 50% of the population. LT50 is lethal temperature, in this case, to kill 50% of the population. So that's what we were doing. We dropped temperatures from -2 down to -18, and we kept dropping it until we killed half the population in order to say, okay, that's the threshold. And of course, after we finish our LT50s, we regrow them after they run through the baths at those various cycles. We grow them back out to see what survived. Now, you can't really see very well, but we go down in temperature by 2 degrees each time. 0, 2, -4, 6, -8, -10, -12, -16. So we can see kind of a graduation of recovery after about the 14 -16 of this of the polar reptans. And anyway, on the left, I should probably have these switched. On the left, we remove these, and that's because from a golf course operator standpoint, again, this is applied research. If your greens come out of the wintertime with just a few growing out of your surface, if there's not even 50% cover, that didn't work. It's not going to be acceptable for you guys to open up. We want to get you to here all the time. So anyways, that's the idea behind this LT50 testing, which we took on 3 different times. So there's all the samples, all the process samples from all those different replications that we did. And again, the same sort of thing. We're trying to show the progression, or a similar progression, or a trend in each of these testing treatments, and it's pretty obvious. You know, you can see a graduation from very healthy, full plants, full recovery, down to damn near nothing. And that was on January 20th. So waiting for we did that first round of testing in October, I think it was. Yeah, October 15th. Then, of course, snow fell. We set up snow fences around the whole putting green here because you guys have talked about winter kill, the kinds of things that can kill a green in the wintertime that aren't disease related. If you don't have anything, you can notice over here, look at how open this is. In the prairies, certainly flat areas, wind can blow your snow right off your playing surfaces. And as a result, if you don't have a good cover, you can lose turf by direct low temperature kill. This is why we put up snow fencing, to block the snow, to keep it on site, which snow is the absolute perfect insulator. It breathes a little, it protects a little. You'll never get desiccation problems as a result. So that's why we put up the snow fencing, just to make sure that we get real good snow cover in an area that, especially in ours with being so wide open, we can't always count on snow cover. So the second LT50 test happened when we went 2 weeks into, once the ground was frozen. Mark went back out. We had pre-cut these, so it was fairly easy for him to get out. You can see we've got flags marking each individual plot, so he knows where to begin and doesn't have to shovel the whole thing off. There's the wire coming out of plug. Anyways, so he pulled these out, processed them again, and then we ran them through the baths one more time. You can see he did that with every single plot, tested them through exactly the same test, and similarly, the experimental design was required to do that 3 times, check the recovery to make sure evaluation of dehardening at various stages throughout the wintertime. So this is right now. This is just happening. We had one more set of tests to run through, but this was a picture I took while I was on site just last week. Obviously, it's still pretty cold out there. We haven't had, well, in my view, not awesome recovery. The polar reptans isn't really as bright green as I would have hoped, but this is a reflection of low nitrogen rates, not the carb packing that we would have done with granular sources. You can see all of our plots, same as ever. There's no reason for the different color flags. That's just identifiers. There's our first LT50. There's our second plug, and you can barely see it, but there's still, the numbers are still hanging in there, so you know which treatments that you're on. We did the last one in April. That's brand new. We just finished, and they're regrowing in the greenhouse. So we've got 2 more weeks, 3 more weeks to evaluate them and see how they came up. The last step, of course, is a evaluation of the plots themselves. So in another week, well, on Tuesday, we'll be going out again to take another evaluation. We use a tool called NDVI, which is imaging. It's obviously, you know, when you say, well, how green is that, is very subjective. NDVI takes a little bit of the subjectivity out of it by appointing a number or a figure associated with the density and the darkness of the color. So that's what we get. That's what we use to help determine turf quality testing. It measures density and it measures color. And then we also send those away for tissue testing in order to determine what's the level of nitrogen in those leaf blades to see how much carbohydrate have we got left, or any, as a measure of how much actually went in the first place. So that's kind of the entire process of our fall fertility trial in foliar that we did. And it's, like I said, it should be done in another 3 weeks, and then we have to start evaluating the data, which is exciting. I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys what happens. There's a few more slides at the bottom there, but that's just on how to calibrate your spreader. It might be helpful for you guys if you want it, but I'll leave it in there. But does anybody have any questions with regards to what we set out to do, or what the procedure of the experiment was that we did? Any questions at all? Cool. I guess that was explained sufficiently, I hope, anyways. If you guys would like to review, this is the actual fall fertility. Let's see if hopefully you guys can see this. You can't see it, but it's here. I'm going to have to represent, so stand by for 2 seconds. Okay, so that you should be able to see that momentarily. Everybody see that?
Yeah, it popped up.
Sweet. So this is the actual experimental design and research project plan for that fall fertility trial. So you guys know I've got an activity for you today to plug away at. Nothing too serious, but hoping that you have time to do it today. As something to reference, something to compare. I've walked you guys through the plan itself. It was, in this case, it was a 16 treatment experiment. So we had the control, we had 4 different rates of the same product, giving us 16 treatments, and then we replicated them 4 times. So we had 64 1x2 meter plots. Now the completely randomized design is simply, well, there's various different ways of laying these things out. Completely randomized, there's a program that we use called MStat out of Michigan that takes all of our treatments and just shuffles them all up and tells us how to lay it out. There's nothing really that scientific about it, to be truthful. All it does is randomly spread out each treatment, so you know that if you put all the, it avoids any complications or misconstruence of data if you have, you know, all of the highest treatments all in one long line and then all the lowest treatments all in one long line. We use 2 different products, this 2800 and a urea or a 0025 as the liquid treatment in this case. There were all of our list of treatments. There's the untreatment control, which is, they call it a treatment, but it really isn't. You don't apply anything. That's the, as you said, the benchmark or the baseline we call the control. And these are each one of the treatments we applied. 1/2 pound of nitrogen, 1 pound of nitrogen, 1.6 pounds of nitrogen, and so on and so forth. Now, these are high rates of foliar. We want to see if it can get in or not. Anyways, the details are all right here, and this also explains the kind of data that we're collecting. The outcome, of course, is to determine if any of these rates showed significant variance, which would suggest that foliar applications in the fall will work. So, and that's simple. That's the entire thing. So, for those of you that want to check it out, that's the layout. I wonder why it just goes blank here. I'm gonna have to I'll fire up the page again. It's funny, it seems to do that when I have secondary sheets or things coming up. Anyway, this will repopulate the main page. There you go. So, I guess my point is, what I'm going to ask you guys to do this afternoon is design an experiment. And this is not going to be too complicated, pretty straightforward. There's two different things that I'd like us to try. What I'll do is I'm going to let you guys break out for about half an hour to work on this. We'll reconvene at 12 just before the end of class because I'd like to impose one more thing on you, and that's really to look at the internships. So here's the experiment that I'm going to ask you guys to work on together right now. It's very, very simple. Should be straightforward. I think between all of your groups, you can pull this off in a half an hour, no problem. This is a very, very typical example of a research project that I think you guys can figure out. The assignment here is you're doing a research project for an industry organization that claims that one of their new fungicide products, Robust Ultra, totally fictional, promotes plant growth and development and in addition to controlling a wide range of diseases. So the project description or proposal must include the research collaborator is asking you to conduct a trial on 3 different ryegrass cultivars, Excel, Density, and Power. Again, these are fictional, but these are the 3 different cultivars that you need to trial against. The next component is you need to be able to test the different rates of Robust Ultra. And I don't want you to concern yourselves with 1 ounce, 2 ounce, or 3 ounce. Just say rate 1, rate 2, rate 3. Okay? Last but not least, we want to understand the effects of the cultivar. But the most important thing here is rate response. So I want you to set up a experimental design to test those 3 different ryegrass cultivars against the 3 different rates of Robust Ultra with 4 replications. Okay, I think you guys should be able to pull this off fairly easly. I hope, anyways. I would jump back into the readings if you need a little bit of help. That's probably the biggest hint there. But it's up to you how you want to run this through. There's several different design strategies that you can apply to this. Don't get too complicated. You can hand draw this if you like. Use Microsoft Word. The submission, we'll talk about it as a class at 12, but I'd like you to submit something on behalf of your group, one per group, using whatever you want to use. Excel, you want to use Word, you want to draw a picture and take a picture of it. That's fine too. We don't have a lot of time, about 30 minutes to pull this off. So if does anybody have any questions as far as what I'm asking you to do here for the next half hour or so? Everybody's still there. Sometimes I get the feeling that you've all stayed logged in, but you're really at the bar.
Yeah, I feel like today is a drag ass kind of day.
That's every day, man.
Well, you know what? This is the push to the finish. In many ways, you can look at today as being the last day of classes. So then you get a bit of a break. So I hope that helps see you light at the end of the tunnel here. If there's no questions here, guys, that's what I'm hoping you guys make sure that my I think the due dates and all that sort of stuff still work. I did shuffle a few things around, but anyway, this is a pretty straightforward assignment that I think in groups you guys ought to be able to pull off. One submission per group. I'll give you half an hour to do it. Let's reconvene here at 12 o'clock at the same Hangout location and evaluate see what you guys came up with. It'll just take a minute, and then I'm going to send you home with the last item of the course, which is having a look at these internships, where I want you to do one preliminary report for me so we can talk about it in the morning. And that's it. Does that sound okay, everybody? Questions from the chat box?
No, sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. Awesome. Let's reconvene here at about 12. I'll stay online here for a few minutes if any of you guys want to clarify something.
Jason, did you get my last email last night?
Sorry, who's that? Jaden?
Yeah.
I did. I will get into that, buddy.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know I had to republish it, so I was sitting there like, oh, I handed this in like a long time ago.
Yeah, honestly, it's at this point, it doesn't really. I did put an assignment in there to get you to publish on your website. It's really just a strategy to try to keep you guys working towards the final goal here, and so you're not panicking on Sunday night. How do I load this into my website?
Right. Yeah, it's good to know that I need to republish it.
For sure.
Also, just have a title page.
Yeah. Right on.
Also, the way my thing is set up, I don't really have a title page. It's all just one big page with headers.
Well, if I guess I did change the way that final assignment reads. What I'm looking for, because you weren't the first one to bring this up. Somebody else brought that up yesterday. Excuse me. A cover page, accurate labels, something like an introductory page that, like when you log into your golf course webpage, it's got a pretty picture. It shows directions of navigation. This is where I go to get this, and that, as opposed to just whammo. You open up the webpage and all this information is just blah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's just a way of organizing it. That's, I guess, what I'm really getting at.
Okay.
Make it look a little bit attractive. Think about from your employee standpoint, if you're going to use this thing as a training tool, as an educational tool, it's got to be a little bit welcoming. Thank you for working with us this summer. This is your employee handbook. And maybe a colorful picture of you or the crew or the club or something along those lines. And then just a strategy so they can see very clearly, where do I go to find the mission statement? Or some guys have actually put that mission statement in right on the very first page, right underneath the intro.
Yeah, that's what I have right now. So
yeah, I think that's a good approach too. But primarily, it's all about just making a look at presentation.
Right. And then with the course standards and the what is it? The weekly schedule or something like that?
Yeah.
The proposed schedule or something?
Yeah.
Can we just take those from like the projects we did? Because they don't really look like projects. It just looks like a calendar and a list of our course standards.
Yeah, like your job is to take all that group work. You might not, it might not have been tailored to your course. I want you to take that course standards as a template, and if it's transferable into yours, awesome. But I'm going to make sure what I'm going to grade you on is making sure that your course standards template is equivalent to your weekly schedule.
Okay.
Okay, that's where you have to individualize it.
Right.
Okay. Most of the hard work is already done.
Yeah.
And I've given you guys all kinds of comments into your into the feedback, whether it's on the doc or on the Moodle here, how to maybe improve it, or some of the things that jump out at me as being not quite working. You know, it's really hard sometimes to get your course template list of jobs to line up with your weekly schedule. That's usually the biggest issue people have. That's the hardest part.
Okay, cool.
I hope that's clear. Hey, before we leave today in class, pose the question to the class. If anybody had any good ideas, maybe that's something that we share in class tomorrow too.
Yeah, okay.
Beauty. I'll try to get all your grading done today.
Perfect. And we're back in here at what time?
About noon. Give it 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
Okay. See you then.
All right. Thanks.
Are you still here? Oh,
Yes, I am.
Okay, I don't really understand what we're supposed to be doing here.
Okay. What part don't you understand? You know the factors
Like-
that we're trying to test?
Like I have one through these descriptions 1 through 5, right?
Yep. Now you're working with your groups though, right?
Yeah, I can't get a hold of any of them though.
Oh, hold on. Which group are you in?
C.
Well, that's not fair. None of them are. Did they not invite you to a
Oh, I
chat
sent
box
an
or
invite
anything?
out. No, I sent an invite out and didn't get any. But I got one of them texting now.
Yeah, you should definitely connect with your group there and see if you can pull this together.
Yeah. Evan had to take his wife to the doctor, but other than that, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
But anyways, with these,
So you've got 3 different types of turf, right?
Yeah.
And you've got 3 different rates.
Okay.
So 3 different types of turf requires, and you also have 4 replications.
Okay. Yeah.
So when you think of all those factors, that should break up or help you realize your experimental design.
Okay.
The best thing to do is just draw a picture.
Yeah. Is that all we need? Is just a picture?
Well, there's a little more detail in the explanation there,
Okay,
but there's not a whole lot to do. I'm sorry you haven't been able to find anybody in your group.
Well, I just shot him a text, hoping for a reply somewhat quick.
Yeah, that's not very fair. Evan, his wife's pregnant, isn't he? Isn't she?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's understandable. Well, it's not, give it a shot. We only got 10 minutes to plug away on this. But remember, you've got 4 replications of each trial, right?
Right.
And so we've got 3 different types of turfs.
Yeah.
And the control. And then we've got 3 different rates and a control rate.
Yeah.
And you multiply those all together, and that'll give you the treatments in your experimental design.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, give it a shot. There's no wrong answers here. This is all just for, a little bit of fun, especially if you're doing it on your own. That's a bit rough. Maybe we'll talk about it as a class and help you wrap your head around it. When you get together in the group, you may have to educate everybody else in your group.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, Jaden.
Okay.
We'll catch up in about 10 minutes here.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Oh, you are? Okay. It's XL Dynasty in power. I'll just change it to D quickly. You got the rest there from the bottom? Okay, I'll just change XL Dynasty power, yeah. Okay. Kind of tedious writing out the rest here, but...
Hey, Paul, your mic's on, hey?
Oh, thank you.
I thought he was just like talking to the class.
My bad.
There we go. I just spieled right off there with my mic off. Anyhow, guys, it's about 10 after 12. I would love to wrap this up before we convene for the day. I'd like to go through, if you don't mind, maybe we'll just go in order, groups A through C, or D, or E, I should say. How you guys made out in terms of what kind of a plot design did you make out? What was your general outcome, and what does your map look like?
Sure, sounds good.
We can do Will, John, Jacob, Jordan, or Nolan. Any of you guys are hey, happy to have anybody take the mic.
All right, so in this case, we were going with this a complete random design.
Yep.
That way, then you get your randomization, so you're not all in the same location, right? So if you do have undulations or more coverage or anything in more areas, that it's not all specific to a certain corner of your plots.
Yep.
I know it says here to talk about the factor, the treatment, and the experimental unit. So the factor, I believe, would be the rate at which the fungicide is being applied.
Yep.
And that would contribute to different results.
And there's a second factor in there, but they're also sort of, you could call them our experimental units as well. What would they be?
The experimental units would be the different cultivars of the perennial ryegrass, excel, density, and power.
Excellent. Excellent.
And then your treatment would be the fungicide, the robust ultra.
Yep. So how many treatments did you have all together given your, what did we have, 3 different rates? And the
yeah, so it would be 39 plots. Let's see if we have that right. So it would be, let's see here.
Yeah, it was 39.
We're going to do 4 of each.
Yep, 4 times 4.
16. I'm just looking at our numbers here. That doesn't
That's it. You got to have control as well, though.
You've got 16 treatments to make.
Yeah.
Right? And who can tell me how many, if we take into the number of replications standard, how many does that turn into as far as how many treatments are we looking at?
Good. 48 with the control.
It's actually 16 treatments. So we've got a no rate treatment. We've got against a no rate on density, excel, and power. A half rate treatment on density, excel, and power. Full rate on density, excel, and power, and then double rate treatment on density, excel, and power. That's 12 per block. 16 per block. Well, no, that's right. Because we had three rates, didn't I? So
yeah, I thought it was 12 per block, and then there's going to be 3 blocks, so it would provide us with 36 plots. That's the way that Group E worked it out.
Yeah, that's right. I only specified 3 rates, didn't I? So yeah. So three rates and your control works out to be 12. 12 per block, 12 treatments. So 12 times 4 replications.
I thought we were only doing 3 replications, 3 cultivars with 4 replications.
Yep.
And 3 different rates. I just in the math that I did, I thought that would give 36 plots. Am I wrong with that? Because you've got density has rate 1, 2, and 3.
That's right.
And you're going to do 4 replications of each. So that's 12 plots for density.
That's
and
right.
then you have 12 plots for excel and 12 plots for power, which gives us 36 plots.
Plus control for each of those cultivars.
Okay, so I'm missing the control. I just had the 3 different rates in there. So
here's what I came up with, guys, as far as that goes. And again, this is just for learning here. I had 4 blocks or 4 replications. This is our control, right, on each. Now, this is not randomized. This is not how you guys would have done it. Everybody might have done this a little bit differently, but there's all the treatments all together. So 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 12 per block. 12 times 4 is 48. Now, there's more than one way to produce a project. So you guys did, the Group A, you guys did a completely randomized design.
Yeah, that's what we were shooting for.
Awesome.
We went the same route, but if you do completely random blocks, you would have to seed each cultivar in each of those blocks. Wouldn't it be better to have a plot of each cultivar, like a larger plot?
And what kind of plot would that be, guys?
A laid out or a designed plot.
There's a type of plot that would facilitate that. Absolutely fantastic. I'm not sure who made that comment, but you know, very forward thinking. When you're looking at designing research projects, you got to think about maintenance a little bit too.
Yeah.
How are you going to lay it all out to facilitate realistic sort of activities? It's not unheard of to seed individual blocks like this. In some cases, you grow them outside and you can transfer sod, but that is an issue. Most researchers will seed them individually, but that's a big factor. When we're doing things like a different mowing height study, that's where that strip plot design, what you're talking about there, makes the most sense. For instance, if we were testing the effects of traffic or compaction on mowing heights, a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch, a 3/4 inch, and an inch, we would run a strip plot design just for the maintenance side of it, because you couldn't really, it's very, very difficult to drop the height of cut for this little piece and then raise it and move over here to facilitate, like, logistically. You might want to change up your plot design for that reason. Absolutely excellent point in that regard, guys. I'm not sure who made that point. Who is the strip plot design suggestion from?
I think that was Ethan.
That was Darren. That was Darren for sure.
Are you guys all taking credit?
No. I was commenting off of Ethan's comment.
Okay, beauty. I'm kind of keeping track here, guys. I'm giving you obviously this is not a formally marked piece, but I wanted to throw this at you to get a little bit of participation anyway. So I'm keeping track a little bit anyhow. How about, so we've heard from Group A. What about Group B? Any of you guys in Group B have a comment on how you designed yours?
Well, we could have Cade present his screen just to show ours, but
sure.
Were basically working on kind of a standard box setup with different plots set up for the different types of grass and for the different amounts of the different rate of product that we would put on. And then we would have our own plots just for a control plot without the product at all. And then we were kind of thinking we would have these different plots on different areas of the course to kind of see the different, like, little mini, what's the word I'm looking for? Just the temperature, weather around the area, what kind of conditions,
microclimates
shade and stuff. Microclimate. Thank you very much. That's kind of just spread out around the course to see the different microclimates effects on the grass itself and how the product could assist or possibly be detrimental to it.
Okay, perfect. Well, I like your plot design. Can anybody tell me there's just one piece that's missing from here?
The control.
That's right. That's it. And and as far as as you mentioned, the randomization or the rotation, again, that's something. There's programs out there that you can use. One of them is called MStat, which is it's actually from Michigan State. That's why they call it MStat. Anyway, a bit of a play on words, but that's free software that's been around for a long time that will take a treatment plot like this and randomize them for you. There's another one that you may have heard called ANOVA. If you haven't heard it already, you definitely will. For those returning in the degree in November, you're going to hear that from Ken Fry for sure. Again, anyway, there's a couple programs out there that will randomize these for you if you understand which treatments are happening when. Very cool, guys. How about, sorry, that was Kendon's group. How about Zach, your group?
We pretty much have nothing right now.
No, okay, never quite got there. That's all right. That's all right. I think I heard Evan had to rip off to the hospital with his wife.
I just logged on, so it's
pretty much just the doctor. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, no big deal. All good, guys. There's is there any comments that anybody would like to make with regards to this activity before I take over the screen again? Okay.
Do you want us to hand this in?
If you don't mind, guys, I'd like to give you some more marks before we finish this course up, before we get into the final project anyways. Again, cool. just for participation, but if you submit something there, I can give you some points for it. We've talked about it a little bit. Obviously, there's more than one way to skin this cat, so use your own judgment how you'd like to do this. But to simplify things, we've got 48 treatments to make in terms of how this would work out. A 2-factor experiment. Experimental units are the cultivars, and the treatments being the rate of fungicide at 3 different rates. And don't forget your control is part of that too. So that's a very, very simple assignment. This was drawn from a bigger one. This was this is actually, so you know, so you don't get too if you guys pulled it up together really, really well. This was derived from an assignment that I had to do for Penn State. This was the same experiment. However, I've reduced a few factors here to help you guys to be able to do it really fast, type of thing, and do it as a group. But I'm going to post this in amongst the answer sheet so you guys can draw from it. Maybe it'll help you modify your own or finalize your own. Again, yours is going to be a little bit different, but maybe the way I did it in the split plot design can help you wrap your heads around how to make sense of your own. So you can see here how I did mine with the 4 replications here. I basically split it into 3 different components here with 3 different varieties. So something for you guys to review should you choose to before you submit your experiment here. And again, not much points for that. I suspect most of you are done already. Now, the last thing I want to present to you guys, and this is going to be the last thing we do work-wise as a class, is I'd like to prepare you guys into the summer. And how we're going to do that is make sure yeah, here we go. So what I'd like to do here for, so quickly submit that, design the experiment in the next little while. And then for the remainder of the day, this is an individual task for you guys to do. And again, you can see this is a pass-fail. I'm not going to give you necessarily any points. It's all for participation and really to facilitate the summer a little bit better. I don't want there to be any confusion about what we're up to. I want you to get in. You've all been enrolled in TRF 2820 and TRF 2830. These are my field schools with you guys, and I want you to familiarize yourself. This is the first one you get to, and again, days, I can plug these in. It might be close to July 8th. I got to double check, but anyways, that's roughly when we're going to see you, because you've got Dave's 2810 course first, and then we pick up. Now, the way I've set up your internships is this. You have 4 learning goals in each course. You've got 2 of these courses with me back to back throughout the summer. So they're both going to be open for you at the exact same time. Now, the timing is flexible. You can either follow through. Now, I've put these together with some strategy, and that I think these things will happen most likely for you during these times of the year, but everybody's a little bit different. So you can follow these prescribed due dates, or I'm going to let you mix that up and shuffle them like a deck of cards, if that makes any sense to you. So of our 4 learning goals, here's an example: reclamation. What I'm asking you to do in each one of these goals, and we'll use reclamation first. On July 8th, you see here at the top, begin July 8th and finish July 14th. At the end of every week, July 8th would be a Monday. By the Sunday of that same week, I want you to produce your preliminary goal and submit it. And we'll open up the preliminary goal right here so you can see what I'm asking. This is the format that I want you guys to use. It helps you walk through what I'm asking for. Shouldn't be too much wondering what's required, the deal is the first week, I want to see your project plan, and I want to see how you're going to proceed with each learning goal. So for this first week, starting on Monday by Sunday night, I want you to consider this. This time of year, hopefully, and ideally this could have happened a little bit earlier. You can start this whenever you want throughout the year, by the way. Most courses have lost a little bit of turf over the winter time, so this learning goal is to help you identify a specific location where you lost turf, prove why it happened, and complete a reestablishment. So this happening in July for some of you, this might not be turf loss from the winter. This might be turf loss from any number of things. It'll require you, what I'm asking to test your competency on is calibrating seed. If it's a sod job, it better be a significant sod job. I don't want you to throw down two slices of sod and expect this to be a successful learning goal. I need to make it, it's got to be rigorous enough, okay? If you're going to sod an entire hillside and have to stabilize and prep the soil and grade, now we're talking about me accepting that as a learning goal. But just a couple pieces of sod at the entrance of a set of stairs or something otherwise, I'm not going to accept. And then in that preliminary goal, as you explain it, that's when I'll let you know. Go back and redo it. Okay? So it's in your best interest to pick a preliminary goal that has sufficient rigor that somebody is going to accept. You know, I guess I have to share this with you. When I look at you guys graduating as a diploma, at a diploma level, and I imagine myself or remember myself as a superintendent looking to hire a graduate from a 2-year diploma, there's a certain level of competency that I expect you guys to hold on to. And if you can't, you're not going to stick around. If as an educator, releasing you into the wild amongst all my colleagues and friends and everything else, I also don't want to release somebody who's incompetent. So these learning goals, they will be rigorous enough, and I'm going to let you know if they're not. Okay, it's not a time to be, to bird out here. So developing your project plan in this specific learning goal, reclamation, I want you to break this out. You can use this template specifically to simplify your world. What area are you talking about that requires reclamation or reestablishment? This is where pictures are great, videos are great. Anything to help me understand the scope of your project, why you're choosing it, and whatnot. Now, the evaluating the project plan is part 2. That's what observations have you made for that specific site that may have contributed to the species failure. This could be at a green surround. It could be at a walk-on area or a traffic area. Look around, take a soil probe out, look at the shade, look at everything in the area that you think may have been contributing factor to why that turf died in the first place. You see, a poor project plan would be to say, oh, well, that turf dies. We're going to cut it out and put more turf in there. That hasn't solved any problems. I want you, whether you can or can't do anything about it, I want you to figure out why it died. Okay? The definition of insanity, keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. Keep thinking of that when you come up with this reestablishment thing. I want you to figure out why the turf died and figure out a solution. Take soil probes. Maybe it has insufficient soil. Maybe you require a rotation plan to move the traffic around. Maybe you need to incorporate a monthly solid tine or aeration program with it. Maybe it's not getting irrigation. Evaluate the area. Find out really why that turf died before you go and reestablish it, to make sure, to prove to yourself or to me, best you can, that, you know what, I've done everything in my power to evaluate this problem. And from the best of my knowledge, from the best of my validations, my project here to reestablish, it'll live after this and it'll stay alive. That's kind of the this preliminary part. Develop the project plan. Look at that dead area. Give me a plan on how you're going to establish it. And at this point, give me some of the validating factors that you've identified. Now, finally, produce the plan. The last piece of this, and this is the most important piece, the second week of each learning goal, for me, is the doing, the hands-on, the action, the physical activity of grading that area, pushing that seed and applying that seed, watering it in, and growing that thing in. Now, in this specific case, the goal of overseeding or reestablishment, it's okay that you don't produce your final plant or validate the results within a week, because obviously it takes time to germinate seed if that's the route you're going. It's totally fine to submit your project here to say validation deferred until approximate date X. That is to say, and that helps me also see, hey, this student knows when the seed's going to germinate, when this is likely to be playable again or full or complete again. Okay.
I guess just a question, Jason, to
sure.
maybe add on to that. I know you said that the due dates on these projects are workable and stuff like that. I know for me, we have a reclamation project going on this year that is going to apply to this. Now, if I start working on this project right away here, say next week or the week after, and build it, by the time June comes around or whenever this is due, maybe that validation will be present.
That would be kick-ass. That would be totally awesome. You know, the difficulty with these field schools and the way we've got them broken up is different things happen to different people at different times all over the countryside. We have a student in Ontario whose conditions are going to be dramatically different than a student in Alberta who's going to have dramatically different situation going on in BC. So construction project timing varies, seeding project time varies, fungicide everything varies. So by that submission, the due dates themselves are very flexible. I want you to choose learning goals in my courses that are applicable for you at that specific time. And if it happens to happen before, it happens to happen afterwards, that's totally fine by me. It's totally good. I'm checking every single one of these assignment submissions every single week. So that's okay. The hardest part for me to do is to try to motivate you guys or help you guys, encourage you to make sure that every single Sunday you need to submit something. You need to keep going. The worst thing can happen is to put this off and try to pull all this together at the end of the summer, because it's absolutely impossible. You've got to stay doing something every single week, whether you put 8 preliminary reports together all at once and then wait for the perfect timing, or schedule out in advance. That's the hardest part about achieving these learning goals. But I want you to know that I'm also very, very flexible. If there's something that happens in the golf course that changes the scope of what you're doing, or there's something else happening on the golf course that's you're involved with, like what's an example? What's a good example? So here's a good one. I don't have any learning goals lined up in construction, for instance, because honestly, for the most of you, that's not very predictable. However, last year I had a student whose club took on they reconstructed, tore up, graded, rebuilt, tip to tail the driving range tee box at their golf club, and they wanted to submit that as a goal. Absolutely, that's the best kind of goal that I could hope for. It's happening on the golf course, therefore it's relevant. You're involved with it. It's part of your day-to-day already. That's the key stuff. I want something that's, if it's happening on the golf course, it's relevant. If it falls outside the learning goals that I've prescribed, that's okay, and I'll show you why. When we get back into these goals, you see I've got one learning goal prescribed in reclamation, one in weed ecology. And I mean, I can simplify this as quick as possible. Go out there and identify a weed for me, find a control, find why it's taking over, and then control it through various methods. Wildlife habitat, that's one other goal. Fourth goal, watershed protection, that is minimize leaching or similar. There's also an alternative goal or a self-directed goal. This is to help ladder you guys into the DFS into the 4th year. We can call this the wild card. Anything that's happened, just like I explained, anything that's happening on the golf course that's relevant, anything that you feel is that you have a chance to learn from, that either applies something that you've learned out of the last 2 years, which could be damn near everything, you're okay. You can use it as a learning goal and submit it as such, just like any of the other ones. So I look at all these learning goals like a deck of cards. Let's see, it's July. Yeah, watershed protection works for me this time, and I'll spin that card out. The next goal, maybe we're looking at August 5th now. You know what? This is a better time for me to do weed ecology. Now we've got a clover outbreak. That's the one I'm going to handle now, and spin that card out. If you get my drift, I want you to look at these goals like a deck of cards, and I'll say that more than once, as you've heard. Does that help everybody understand kind of the format, what I'm getting at here?
Yeah, you betcha.
Okay, so let's go. Again, I want to make sure that I take just enough time. Every single preliminary goal assignment looks just like this. Okay, there's a preliminary in here. It's meant to guide you. It's not meant to generally define you, but I'll be looking at these three very important components in every single learning goal to make sure that you're hitting the mark. And again, the preliminary is to tell me what your action plan is going to be. At the bottom here, you see in red the validation by mentor support. I want you to include your mentor, your superintendent, into these Google Docs. I'm going to put comments right on here, and your mentor is going to answer right on here. And that kills a bunch of different birds here. Your superintendent knows what's going on. I know what's going on, and I can communicate with the superintendent or see the level of involvement or support they're giving you. Okay, it shouldn't be excessive work for your superintendent. More importantly, I want them to know what you are up to. One of our learning goals here, and I will go back. See what I'm asking them to do. I jump ahead so fast. Anyways, to validation, mentor support. I need your superintendent to acknowledge, yes, Darren's picked a reasonable location, requires reestablishment. I would agree, and that he's picked a good spot there. Some of these spots, and here's an example. I had a student who, at this stage, this exact same assignment, picked a spot that never grew grass, grew like shit, wanted to reclaim it, proposed to the superintendent, and the superintendent at this stage said, oh, you know what? That's a terrible place to go and work on this assignment. We have a subterranean fuel, it was a tank, an old tank, and it never had enough soil put on top of it to grow effectively. So about under this much soil was a concrete container. So at this point, the mentor was able to step in, the superintendent, to say, hey, you know what, John, this is not probably the best place to grow grass. You won't be able to grow grass there because of what's going on underneath the soil. So let's pick a new spot. So in many ways, getting your mentor involved here is going to save you some time. So make sure they know what's going on. When we talked to our superintendents about these field schools and how to get you guys get the most out of it, one of their big things were we want to know what our students are doing all summer. What are they learning? Are they doing anything at all? They're motivated to educate you guys, to get you guys competent, up to speed with what it means to be an assistant super. So that's why that should be your motivation to get them involved. Don't hide from it. I asked them some pretty legitimate questions here at the bottom, and this is relating to your specific location. If one of the goals, and one of them is to go and spray for weeds, another one is to go out and spray fungicides, is this learning goal appropriate over this time period? If you guys have a tournament coming up, he might say, no, it's probably not the best time to go and throw a phytotoxic reaction onto all of our fairways. We might defer this. The project plan is great. I support it, but not this week or not next week. When would be the next time to do it? And they might suggest. On item C there, 4C, is the golf course resources available at this time? This is me following up with the superintendent to say, hey, I'm asking Darren to go and apply 10 bags of greens fertilizer. Do you have the resources for them or for him? Do you have a spreader for him? Are the tools there to follow this through? Again, this is something that I'm asking each superintendent to kind of commit to you guys, provide the supply that you need. And last but not least, if this doesn't work, if this isn't a good learning goal to occur at this time, I would love for you guys to be able to talk to them about your superintendents about what might be a better learning goal if this one isn't appropriate. The time isn't wasted. This preliminary goal has already been completed, filled out. You've got your action plan down. The mentor support is really about, is the timing right? He might say, you know what, our fertilizer delivery is late. It might not be here till next week. Let's defer this until such and such a date. I'm flexible with that because that's real life. And you guys should be flexible with that too. You know, part of being a really good superintendent, a really good professional is being able to roll with it, be a self-starter and be able to find solutions, right? Not just say, oh, damn it, I can't do this anymore and quit. So there's always a backup, always an alternative. So that's your preliminary goal, guys. Okay, I want to know what you're going to do in the action plan. So now let's look into the second part of that assignment. So we just finished looking at the preliminary report. That'll be due the Sunday of whatever week you begin it. And here's the final. The final learning goal in reclamation and establishment. It's okay for you if you guys want to submit your final assignment or your completed action plan on that same document. In fact, it's easier for me. So if you want to create one doc and submit it as both the preliminary and the final goal, if they happen consecutively, one after another, that's totally fine with me, and maybe it's easier for you guys to stay organized. Then the final goal report very simply stated that requires a student to illustrate and validate they have performed each step outlined in that preliminary methodology. So if you tell me in that preliminary goal that, you know what, we've got a reclamation area, the preliminary, I found out that it's shaded, the soil is inadequate, it gets too much traffic, we need to put up barriers, we need to aerate, we need to chop down these branches, and then we need to seed it. I'm going to calibrate the seeder and apply it at such and such a rate, apply starter fertilizer afterwards, and water it. Your final goal report is you have to prove to me that you did it. Okay? Not just, it's one thing saying you're going to do something. The proof is in the pudding. Prove to me that you did it. And think about it from my perspective. If a video in this regard is fantastic, befores and afters, I can kind of allude to some of the things that have happened. But if I'm looking at your final report and I can't prove without a doubt that it's you on the other side of that camera, or your pictures could have been taken by anybody, or they're just another beautiful picture of your golf course, I'm going to carve you up on it. I want you to make sure that you can prove to me that you're competent. When when another superintendent asks me, hey, is Bill going to be a good assistant for me? I need to be able to say, yeah, man, he went through every single one of these competencies in the summer. I know he can fertilize. I know he can spray. I know he can seed. I know he can manage his staff. I stand behind that hire. So, I really want you guys to prove your worth to me in this summer internship. Prove your learning goal has been completed, and you can get a little bit creative. One of the best validations I ever saw was we had a student who part of their water conservation was, if you have valves that don't work, irrigation heads that don't work, or water that leaks, a leaky valve, leaky anything. Technically, water conservation includes repairing leaks. So he took on a rather complicated T-valve. I think it was 3-inch coming in, 2-inch going out in another direction, a 3-way valve. He had to do compression fittings and everything else, and there was a little bit of wiring involved. What he ended up doing was he set up his, I think he had a tripod, and he set up his phone on the tripod to take time-lapse photography of him doing the project. And here I see the thing coming out, how time-lapse goes, super speedy in the swing shovel, dug all this out. Then I see him cutting all the pipe, and then I see him putting on the compression fitting on this side, putting on the compression fitting on that side, gluing this pipe, connecting that pipe. And then you see a little bit of a break at the time the light goes down and comes back up. I could tell that it was the next day type of thing. And you could see it charge up, and he fired up a sprinkler head within sight of the repair to prove to me that, hey, I didn't just fix this. I proved to you that it worked and it was me. And he turns around, looks at the camera. You know, that was probably the coolest validation I was able to track her anyways. I mean, absolutely, without a doubt, when somebody asks, hey, can Jimmy fix an irrigation repair? I'm like, goddamn right, he proved it to me. And anyway, so that's an example of a really, really good validation. Save you some write-up, potentially, and so on and so forth. But that's just one example of the validation I'm looking for as part of these learning goals. I've got a sample. Now, here's a sample turf establishment preliminary report that I'll share with you guys. Do you see that?
No, still just looking at your Moodle screen here, Jason.
Isn't that funny? All right. I'm going to have, I guess I'll have to stop presenting and present again. So stand by here. I don't know why it does that. Always something to learn, hey? Okay, here's one. Turf establishment, the learning goal. Now, in this case, I had it posted for preliminary goal 1. This individual, this was Alyssa at Belvedere. She decided to post it, or she decided to do this late June at her club where it was most appropriate. And here's my my methodology, what I'm asking you guys to do. Identify and differentiate. How did you figure out this was a place needing overseeding? Visual observation, struggling turf. There's the title. She showed some pictures coming on here. Factors contributing to turf loss. Excuse me 1 second. Got a guy calling me from Australia now. I feel bad about hanging up on him. Anyway, so factors contributing to turf loss. Alyssa went out and looked at green contours. She considered the type of green that it was, the type of grass, any compaction in the area, surrounding factors. She looked at slopes. She looked at seasonal temperatures, validating the observations or contributing factors. Here she was able to take some pretty good photography to show that, hey, there was turf loss on this green because of the shade coming off of these trees. And a little bit of the slope coming off of this backside was showing water and melt. So they had a little bit of turf loss in the springtime. Anyway, my point is there's some evaluation here to figure out what actually happened. In this case, so she continues on, proposed solution to seed and why, seeding procedures, the type of seed, the rates, etc., continues on. How's she going to ensure that established? And her mentor, in this case, didn't sign up for it. I think they were off. But anyway, nonetheless, that was one example of how Alyssa was able to share with me what her game plan was. And I wonder why it's doing this. I can't seem to go back to the old. Sorry, guys, I'm going to have to click back again. Anyway, I hope you kind of see that was just one example of a preliminary goal report from Alyssa. Now here's another one, weed ecology. In this case, I'm asking you guys in your preliminary report to exactly, you see the same sort of preliminary report link that I'm sharing with you. Hopefully that's clear on your end than it is mine. How you identify or differentiate among emergent and weeds on the golf course, which is essentially asking you, how do you identify it? It's easy for you to go and say, oh, that's clover. Oh, that's plantain. But I need you to be absolutely sure. If you're using, challenge yourself a little bit. Everybody can pick clover out and everybody can pick dandelion out, but maybe you've got something else on there that you can use that would challenge you a little bit, offer it a little bit of vigor. How do you identify them? Are you using a textbook? Are you using an app? How can you be absolutely sure that's what you've got? because that makes a big difference on what you choose to spray, right? As part of your project plan, I'm asking you to comment in terms of IPM. Do you have a control threshold? Has it been established? And explain. Why do the weeds require control? Is it aesthetic? Is it functional? Is it affecting playability? And of course, validate. And this one's pretty easy. If it's an aesthetic reason why you're controlling the weeds, a picture of showing weeds is pretty much enough. Evaluating the project plan in this case would have contributed to the weed encroachment. Could it be, could the weed be in the rough and the rough hasn't been irrigated or fertilized? Or is it super compacted? It hasn't been aerated? What's been going on? What are the contributing factors? And then last but not least, produce the project plan. What do you need to apply the solution? Well, do you have the herbicide? Do you have the application tool, whether it's a backpack or boom sprayer? Do you have what are the safety requirements according to the label? Do you have all that PPE? Part of spraying weeds and dealing with them appropriately can sometimes be multi-layered, right? It's not just about going out to spray. If you load up a backpack spray and don't have the right PPE on, according to the label directions, and go out and spray, I'm not really producing professionals here. And you would, in that case, you would very likely fail. So even though you've gotten everything done. So on top of it all, if you're going to go out with a sprayer, you've got to calibrate it, make sure that your math is right. And I would produce that in your preliminary plan, calibrate the equipment, tell me your volumes, tell me your totals, how much you're going to spray before you go out and spray it. And more than ever, the validation when I'm asking you to spray is extremely important. Obviously, I don't want you to go out there and spray anything without the supervision of the superintendent who can be there on site to make sure that you get your rate and your calibration correct. It's kind of your security to have another set of eyes. It might not be your superintendent. It might be your supervisor or the next level up in your chain of command. But another set of eyes to be able to look at your rate and your calibrations before you go out and spray it is really, really, really key. I certainly don't want you to go out there and kill turf. If your mentor isn't available, that's okay. I can act as your mentor in that regard. I'll check your calibrations. I'll do your math to make sure you're not going to go out and kill anything, and you're not going to waste your time either. So back to the main page here, guys. That's essentially internship 2. You've got those 4 prescribed. Those are according to the course competencies. Again, use the wild card. I would say I won't say you can use 4 different wild cards. You do have to pursue some of these course competencies. Obviously, that's kind of the deal with education. But I've got that one wild card built in. If you're curious whether or not you think I'm going to accept something beforehand, shoot me a message, give me a phone call, text, whatever. Any questions, guys, before we move on from TRF 2820? These forums, sometimes there'll be learning goal books in here to give you a little bit of help. I also threw these forums in here. These are not graded. These are for you guys. If you're having trouble figuring out, God, I can't find an area for reclamation, I'm really hung up on this one, get in the forum and ask everybody. Ask your colleagues, hey, what are you guys doing for forum? Are you seeding or are you sodding? Get some good ideas from each other. So take advantage of everybody else. I'll go back to, I guess I should go back to the other assignment or the other course. There we are, 2830. This is the other internship, set up precisely the exact same way. They're carbon copies of each other with 4 different prescribed learning goals. And you can see this one starts early September, runs right through until October. And there's a few mandatory goals in here that I need you guys to do. I need to know, is there anybody on the panel here that doesn't have their pesticide applicator's license? Didn't get it?
Darren, I don't have my Part B yet. I've already paid for it and I was ready to write it, but then the COVID came up and they closed the test centers. So I've got to reassess that sometime this season.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, I think they're going to be fairly lax for you guys that got stuck up in or caught up in the whole COVID and availability of recertification and certification is going to be an issue. To let you guys know, as you can become an assistant applicator, if you need the core guide, the core training guide, which allows you to be an authorized assistant, I can give that to you. I'm one of the ministry's certified pesticide applicator trainers, so I can administer those certificates to you if need be. Otherwise, most of you will fall under the applicator assistant in that your superintendent probably has a pesticide license. They wouldn't be able to buy any chemical otherwise. You can be supervised by them. So this shouldn't slow you down too much. If you're having an issue in that regard, please let me know. I can act either as your supervisor on site or get you this assistant applicator certification in the meantime. So there's a couple mandatory items here. I need you to spray a fungicide. And specifically, I want you to be part of your fall fungicide program. Understand the nuances of winter protection and getting ready for it. I also want you to be part of absolutely necessary at least one fertility application. I'm hoping a granular one as well as a liquid one as part of your learning goals this summer. So you're on the sprayer with me probably 2 or 3 times over the summer. I hope that for those of you that don't get a lot of opportunity to do these kinds of things at your club, that the influence of school and the influence of having me as a mentor on the other side or as an instructor on the other side can get you doing some things you might otherwise or might not otherwise be able to do. So FYI, those are some important ones that I want you guys to pull off. Last but not least, we finish up the summer together. So I hope, and timing is kind of questionable for everybody, I would love for you to be part of your irrigation blowout. One of the coolest things about having our program set up the way it is with the internships is have you guys be involved with every single part of the running of the golf course from beginning to end. So the fall is an exciting time for all kinds of things: nutrient loading, fertility applications, fungicide use, blowout, even tons and tons of cultural practice happen at this time too that I want you to be involved with. So internships, super exciting. I hope this is fairly clear on how my internships roll out, and they're open for you right now. You can start into these at any time. I'll try to stay communicating with you consistently throughout the summer. I think it's probably a good idea if we have a weekly video chat just like this, optional, of course, but you can join in, ask anything, talk about the previous or upcoming learning goals, whether they're preliminary or final, just to keep everybody engaged. Any questions so far, guys, about what I've been going over here? Do the summer internships seem attainable? Anything confusing? Anything I can clarify?
I feel like that was a pretty good job, and honestly, I think that what's expected of us for this field school is laid out in a way that's better than sort of the way that we were explained by Ian and Dave last year. I think that we all see sort of what's ahead of us and what's expected, and this was very helpful.
All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that, guys. Again, I want you to look ahead at these. They're open now, even though the course doesn't start now. In order to let you see them, I've got to open them now. So anyways, they are open. That doesn't mean the course starts. According to the academic schedule, you don't have to begin any of my courses until you're done with Dave's. So keep that in mind. He's going to forward weight all of his stuff right off the get-go. So where he has each one of these learning or each one of these summer internships has 4 learning goals, he's going to expect you to pound through bam, 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 bam with him. Just be aware. I don't want you to ignore him in order to do mine because his course will end 8 weeks after it begins. That said, if you do find you have extra time, dig into that into our summer internships, and I will absolutely mark them ahead of time.
Just one note, I guess, for the class. I talked to Dave this week, and he said his field school modules will be open at the latest by a week from tomorrow, so next Friday.
Yep.
He said he has some things to change up in there before he opens them, and he's going to get to that this week. So by Friday next week, we should all be able to see Dave's field school and what we're supposed to be doing with him.
Okay, sweet.
I'm sorry, Jason, just to be clear, are we doing some plans for today in regards to internship? Is there any work that we have to do for that?
Well, what I did today was, and again, I'm not going to, this is kind of paying it forward. If you want to produce a preliminary goal tonight for review tomorrow, this is what I kind of laid out. Objective of the assignment today, and again, it's a pass or fail, so it's not really worth much at all. But the objective was to familiarize yourself with the goals for summer internships. Upon review of both of those courses, 28-20, 28-30, I'd like you to pick a learning goal that you're unsure about that you want to perform a preliminary report for. And this would be the plan of that learning goal. And we can discuss it tomorrow, the process, to how to clarify any unknowns, how to roll it all out. It could be difficult to do this without actually being on course. But again, the most important thing for me is to make sure that you guys can hit the ground running on these internships and start them whenever you want. So I think this activity specifically is optional. I know some of you have already told me that you can't be in class tomorrow, which is fine too. We're pretty much done. This was the last thing that I was going to get you guys to do. Maybe what I can do is I can put this in as an extra credit, give you guys a little bit more feedback if you want to really hammer down the field school details and process and all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't really for any actual marks. And I'm not going to present anything new tomorrow.
So for this optional assignment, I know you just said maybe pick a goal that we're a little bit unsure about, that we maybe need some help on.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to, like, just in my situation with the reclamation project that you just presented there, could I maybe pick a goal that I'm a little bit sort of wrapping my head around how I'm going to go about it and work through that one and explain it? Is that okay too?
I think so, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
Show me the game plan, and I'll give you my feedback on how I think we might pull it together.
Sure, right on. So
you can remember, guys, think about what's happening this summer on the golf course. If it's happening, it's very relevant, and I'm very I would be very interested in having you incorporate that as kind of the wild card outside the prescribed goals here. But of course, I've got to evaluate to see if it has meets a sufficient rigor, right?
Maybe just looking forward as well. I didn't actually go in and look yet, but as for golf course construction, I know we had like 3 or 4 construction plans that we talked about in the fall last year that were outlined that were going to be going this year, and now all of those have been canceled due to COVID. And so for the golf course construction there, in looking ahead, maybe there's a little bit of leniency as to, because I know not many of us are probably going to be doing construction that was supposed to be happening this year. So
yeah, construction's a difficult one. I don't have a single construction learning goal prescribed because this year is no exception to that rule. Those construction projects are usually the ones that get canceled in times of trial and tribulation like we're having now. So it's unlikely that most of you will be doing construction. So that's why I don't ask you to produce one. If you if you do happen to be among the few that are still following master plans and still doing big construction projects or similar, any kind of project relevant to the club at this point, if you want to throw that out as a learning goal, submit a preliminary to say, hey, Jason, you know what? We're rebuilding a retaining wall, or we're digging out our irrigation pond in order to update or fix our impellers or something like that. Submit it as a preliminary goal or send me an email beforehand. Just say, hey, is this too out there? or could this be considered as a reasonable goal? We have a quick chat, and I'll let you know what I think. But I don't turn down too many goals. We had a student last year which they had a flood on their property. It washed out half a golf hole, and as well as a traffic route or travel route into the golf course, that he literally had to stop what he was doing, and that was his new project for the next month. He had to figure out how to fix the road, how to build a retaining wall, how to reshape the grade and rebuild all the irrigation that got taken out. It took over a month of his time in the summer, and he learned a shit ton of stuff doing that. And I accepted that. I think it was multifaceted. I accepted that as two different goals because how long it took and what was all involved. So don't be afraid to reach out and shoot me a message and say, hey, this is how my world is turning right now. This is what I'm doing. If it's happening on the golf course, it's relevant. So I'm very, very open to hear what you have to say and what you're working on.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Sure.
Go ahead.
For that group activity that we just did,
yep.
If you already handed it back in, are you looking for us to go revamp it? Or was it more or less kind of a hypothetical pass or fail sort of situation?
No, you don't need to resubmit it. Throw in what you got done. If you want to add to it, great. I won't. I think, what were the marks I had lined up for that thing? Don't think it was a lot. Oh, it was not too bad. 20 marks is not too bad. Guys, what I'll do is I won't mark that until tomorrow. If you guys want to revise and complete that design to get the maximum amount of marks, then please do so. We've talked about it as a class. I've posted a bunch of some other designs and everything else. You should be able to have a look at it, update it, revise it if you want, in order to get full marks. That would be great. Again, I want all you guys to come out of this ahead. So I'll leave it up to you. I won't submit till tomorrow, or I won't grade it. Sorry, until tomorrow. If you want to work on it this afternoon and submit it, hopefully you'll get 100% on it, and that's fine by me. The other one, the learning goal option, as far as internship, I'll put that in as extra credit. If you want to pursue that, that's great. Now tomorrow for the final day, we really don't have a formal class. I'm going to be here to walk you through any questions that you might have. The basic things that we do have to do, there's this reflective journal. I think I give you 10% for this. Please give me your honest opinions on how you thought the course went, and what you thought of me as an instructor. Maybe some areas how I can improve would be fantastic. Use tomorrow to work on your final assignment, publishing. I'll be here. Anybody who wants to join that communication is more than welcome. It'll be open forum to chat, show and tell, maybe what you've done so far, or how you might want to present some of your policies or handbook. While I had you, maybe what we'll do tomorrow is I'll go over some other handbooks that other students have produced to give you an idea of some of the better ones that I've come across. Kind of an inside look at what other people have submitted in the past. There's some unique ways of doing it. Some have done things like flip books, if you've ever seen those. It's an interesting way. Anyway, that's what we'll do tomorrow, but nothing truly formal. I'm more here. I'll be here tomorrow for you just to help anything or everything you may need in getting ready for this final submission.
Will that be 9 o'clock you'll be coming on?
Yep, I'll be here for 9 again.
Sounds good.
But nothing formal, guys. Unless you want me to cover it or you want me to do something else tomorrow, shoot me an email this afternoon, and I'm happy to follow up, whether it's another agronomic thing or reiterating something we've done already, anything at all. Call it a free willy of classes.
Cool, right on. We'll talk to you tomorrow then. Thank you very much.
Okay, guys. Thanks so much. Not too bad. Talkative as ever. 10 after 1. Yeah, have a look. Review your experimental design. Tune it all up so I can give you full marks. Maybe you want to consider this optional goal review for extra credit, and then get into your employee handbooks. Start tuning those up. If you want to do a show and tell tomorrow, we'll share some good ideas. Thanks a lot, guys.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, boys.
Thanks, Jason.
Yep. Take care.
Hey Jason, I just had a quick question.
Sure.
You have like a big project due tomorrow?
2 seconds. For that employee etiquette policies assignment,
Yep.
would I be able to redo that and kind of re-look it over?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then just kind of incorporate that into my like major employee handbook, kind of the whole website.
Yeah. Did I give you some feedback already on what you submitted?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So why don't you make your changes right on that doc?
Okay.
And then I can see the changes, and it'll make real quick work of it.
Okay, because I have it on my website right now.
Okay. It's quick. Well, do you have it in a Google Doc format or no?
No, I just
okay. Okay, well that's fine. I'll have another look at it and can give you some advice. The nice thing about having it in a Google Doc format, if you can copy and paste it, is when I give you my advice, I can be very, very specific.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I might put it in a Google Doc and then kind of revamp it there.
Yeah, that maybe that would be more efficient.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, just so because it's hard when you're jumping back and forth that for me to give really specific feedback when I say, hey, go to this place and look for that comment, and then this is related to that. It's just for your own.
Yeah.
To be helpful.
Okay. Okay. Well, maybe work on that today then, and I'll let you know if I get it done tomorrow.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Catch you later.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.